Timeless Assassin. Author. Raj_Shah_7152. Chapter 582-604. Chapter 582, Begging. An unknown holding cell, the 12th Elder's POV. Skyshard. Skyshard, listen to me, I'm telling you, this is a misunderstanding, the righteous faction must have turned you against me by feeding you wrong information. Talk to me. PP, please talk to me, I'm sure we can find a resolution to whatever grievances you have. The 12th Elder pleaded desperately, his voice cracking as he leaned forward as much as the ropes binding him allowed. However, to his dismay, Leo only wagged his finger slowly before his face, his eyes locked and unblinking. There is no misunderstanding here, 12th Elder. You see Mu Fan sitting behind me, she has already confessed the truth about your crimes. You no longer have any room to lie. The Elder's eyes widened as he alternated his gaze between Leo and Mu Fan, his voice breaking into a shriek. Mu Fan, you liar. How dare you turn the Shadow Dragon against me? Leo, listen to me, she's from the Mu clan. She's from the enemy clan. She must have turned against us. You can't trust her. You can't. She's a double agent. Leo chuckled, wagging his finger once again before the Elder's face as though correcting a disobedient child. Wrong answer. I'll give you one more chance to confess the truth. Or else. Leo warned, but the Elder foolishly ignored the warning and instead thrashed against his bonds as he spat more venom. Mu Fan, you snake. How dare you bite the hand that feeds you? Look at me. Look at me. I said, look at me. PAA. Asterisk. Leo's hand snapped across his other cheek, the sound ricocheting off the stone walls. A second red imprint bloomed hot on his skin, and this time a faint line of blood trickled from the corner of his lips, staining his chin as his head lolled briefly to the side. The 12th Elder froze again, his expression twisted in stunned disbelief, as though every shred of the dignity he clung to had just been stripped away. Leo leaned closer, his voice low, measured, every word dripping with threat. Wrong answer. Next time, I won't slap. I'll punch and break your nose. The one after that, I'll bring out my dagger and start carving your body. Do you understand? He threatened, as the Elder's breathing grew shallow, his chest heaving as sweat dripped freely from his temple, and for the first time the weight of Leo's words settled into his bones. The silence that followed was worse than the slap, for in that silence he could hear his own fear taking shape. He trembled, his lips twitching as though the words wanted to come but pride fought to hold them back. Yet Leo did not move, his cold stare pressing heavier than the ropes, and slowly the Elder realized that he stood at the edge of disaster, and no matter which road he chose, only pain and suffering awaited him. You can't kill me. I am a member of the Elder's Council. My death will be sensed by Lord Soren, and when that happens, this will not end well for you, Skyshard. The 12th Elder warned, his voice trembling as he clung to his final line of defense. He knew he had no other cards left to play, so he invoked the only name powerful enough to frighten most men, Lord Soren, the one being he believed could crush Leo and his monarch-tier followers with ease. Yet to his disbelief, Leo merely shrugged, as if the threat meant nothing, his expression unflinching even when Soren's name was spoken like a deterrence. Well, if he finds out, he finds out. But nobody harms my family and walks away scot-free. Leo's tone was calm but laced with venom, his eyes never leaving the Elder's. So there's no chance in hell that I let you walk away, even if it means dying here with you. But, his lips curled into a thin, cold smile. Dying is not my intention today. Which means I'll simply make sure you don't either. No matter how much I break you, I'll keep you alive, hydrated, fed, and your body sustained just enough, so that I can return in a few days and do it all over again. Leo's voice never wavered, his presence pressing down like a vice, until the Elder realized that death was not the worst fate awaiting him. Yo, you're crazy. This is madness. The 12th Elder cried, his eyes darting wildly around the chamber. Mu Fan. Viper. Save me. His voice cracked as he turned desperately to Mu Fan first. Mu Fan, listen to me, if you free me, I will shower you in riches beyond counting. Land, power, status, treasures from every corner of the planet, all yours. You won't have to remain some lowly attendant anymore. You can live as a queen here. But Mu Fan only scoffed softly, her eyes refusing to even rise and acknowledge him, her silence louder than any rejection. The elder gritted his teeth and swung his pleading gaze to Dupravel. And you, Viper, no, Dupravel. Help me now and I will rip apart that cursed contract that binds you to Skyshard with my own hands. You'll be free, do you hear me? Free. No contracts, no slavery. You and your son can live as citizens of honor, with wealth and comfort. You'll never have to kneel again. But Dupravel only leaned back against the shadows, arms folded, the faintest shake of his head all the answer that the 12th elder received, as he was forced to negotiate with Leo once more. Leo, wait, listen to me, he stammered, his tone groveling now. If you don't kill me, I will become your slave, just like Dupravel. I will stand by your side as your #1 ally within the council. I'll ensure you never face resistance, never again be forced onto dangerous missions. You will live freely, as you please, with my protection in the council guaranteeing it. He leaned forward as far as his binds allowed, his face desperate, trembling. All of this can be yours if you just let me go, today. Chapter 583, Confession. If you don't kill me, I will become your slave, just like Dupravel. I will stand by your side as your #1 ally within the council. So please let me go, Skyshard. The 12th elder begged, as Leo chuckled at his words. He had the 12th elder exactly where he wanted him now, as him showing weakness in the negotiations was the exact moment Leo had been waiting for. I don't understand, 12th elder, if you haven't done anything wrong, if it's Mu Fan or the righteous faction framing you, why would you agree to become my slave? If you're morally upright, why would you not stick to your truth? Leo asked, as he balled his fists and clenched his fingers, ready to punch the 12th elder's nose the moment he lied. That. I, the 12th elder hesitated, Leo's sinister smile giving him chills, as he paused and checked himself before being punched. Yes, I admit it. I was the one who sent mercenaries to hunt Luke Skyshard down for an entire year. I pushed him to become a stronger warrior, but only because I believed in his potential, and wanted to cultivate the best dragon candidate. The elder's excuse tumbled out, but before he could finish, Leo's fist drove forward. Crack. Asterisk. The sound was sickening as bone gave way, his nose flattening under the force while blood erupted down his face in thick streams, splattering across his chin and dripping onto his robes. Arghhh. The elder's scream tore through the chamber, muffled by the bubbling of blood clogging his throat as he writhed helplessly against his binds. Leo loomed over him, shaking his hand once before curling his lips into a razor-thin smile. Wrong. You didn't give a shit about my brother's potential as a warrior. He said, his voice calm, steady, yet dripping with venom. You wanted a dragon you could control. Nothing more. Nothing less. He concluded after leaning in, as he looked the 12th elder hatefully in the eye as he said it. MMFGGHHH. The elder whimpered through the blood, his body shuddering as his head lolled forward, but Leo gripped his hair and forced his head up, ensuring he could not escape the weight of those words. Next I'm going to unsheath my dagger, so from here onwards, I suggest you speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, because if you do not, I'm going to personally torture you till you arrive on the doorsteps of death. But if you confess your crimes willingly, maybe there's a possibility of making a deal. Leo said, as he observed the aura around his own body flickering, black. He had lied about the possibility of making a deal, but it did not matter, as for now, his goal was to make the 12th elder confess. All right, I'll tell you the truth, don't unsheath your dagger. I'll confess. But it's a long story, so I hope you listen to my side of it. The 12th elder broke, as for once Leo immediately backed off. Step. He walked back towards his chair, sat down with one leg put over the other, and gestured for the 12th elder to speak, as he gave him his space to narrate his side of the story. So, to explain why I chose to train you and Luke so harshly, I need to go back before I ever became the 12th elder. As only then will you understand the full picture of my story. He began, spitting a mouthful of blood on the floor beside him. As you already know, I was once best friends with the previous dragon, Noah Ashburn. He wasn't just my leader or my battle partner. He was my sworn brother. And his loss at the hands of Dupravel shattered me back in the day. He said, as his eyes shifted towards Dupravel with a renewed sense of burning hatred within them. Whispers spread that it had been an inside job, that someone within the cult's council had leaked our mission. After all, how else could the serpents be there? Somebody must have tipped them off, and apart from our crew, only the Elders' Council knew about the details of our mission. And so, I was furious and on the verge of rallying a revolt against the council when the first elder approached me for the first time in my life. The 12th elder recalled, as he let out a long, weary sigh. He told me that if I wanted to change the system, I had to do it from within. He promised to back my rise if I remained loyal to him. So I agreed. And with his support, I won the elections on planet Vorthas and became the youngest elder in the council. But in truth, I was nothing more than another vote in his pocket. My stature translated to no real power. At first, I entered the council determined to uncover the traitor who had betrayed us, but no matter how much I searched, I found nothing. And soon, I became distracted. Instead of looking for my suspect, I became entangled in the web of power that came with being an elder and became obsessed with climbing higher and gaining real influence. He lowered his gaze towards Leo, speaking with quiet shame. I realized there was only one path to true power within the council, raising your own dragon candidate. Every first elder in our history had been the one behind a dragon's rise. With even Noah himself being raised by the current first elder. That is why I was desperate to cultivate one of my own. I realized that in our cult, only the dragon is worshipped like a god apart from Lord Soren, and the man who controls the dragon inevitably becomes the man who controls the council. For years, I had no good news about any promising dragon candidate, but then suddenly, by a stroke of fortune, Mu Fan, while working undercover within the righteous faction, discovered two individuals who might carry the bloodline of the timeless assassin, making them two potential dragon candidates. And so when I learned of this, I did everything I could in my power to bring you into the cult before the righteous faction could claim you. And in doing so, I even saved you from certain death. But I knew I could not openly raise two candidates. After all, I was the 12th elder, the weakest seat in the council. If others discovered you lived, someone higher would have taken you instantly. So I sent you to Rodova Military Academy, not because I believed you could truly graduate as the best, but because it was the only place where nobody else could lay their hands on you. And at least there, you were mine to protect. As for Luke, his voice faltered before continuing, I put him through that brutal training because I had read in a book that nothing spurs a warrior's growth more than life and death struggles. That was my logic. Nothing more. I never intended for him to fall into a coma. But when it happened, I was forced to cover it up. One lie led to another, and the slope grew slippery until it brought us all here. His head hung low, his words ragged. But I swear to you, I never wished for him to end up like that. If anything, I wanted him to become the next dragon just as much as I wanted it for you. He explained, as Leo silently let him continue, his rage bubbling with each passing moment. Chapter 584, Vicious Cycle. But I swear to you, I never wished for Luke to end up like that. If anything, I wanted him to become the next dragon just as much as I wanted it for you. The 12th elder swore, as Leo carefully observed the aura around his body, noting that it did not flicker black to signal deceit. I only ever wanted to become the next first elder, and I did not care how it happened. The cult is a broken place, filled with civilians who care for nothing except the dragon and the endless war against the righteous faction. Which, although unfortunate, is the only obsession of our people. So it never mattered how well I governed my territory, or what development I brought to Vorthas. What mattered to the masses were grand, public spectacles. Like the fourth elder orchestrating a terrorist strike on the Sky God Arena, or his bold effort to raise Ver as the next dragon candidate. Sigh. Over time, I stopped caring about administration or prosperity, because what was the point of raving about development when all the people wanted was blood and revenge? I became a self-centered fool, I admit that, but it is not unique to me, it is the curse of everyone who sits in the council. He explained as he tried to justify himself, his words heavy with bitterness as he compared his corruption to theirs. It took me 30 years to realize that the first elder had played me from the very start. After No's death, when public outrage burned at its highest, there was a chance the balance of power within the council could have collapsed. If I had sparked a revolt then, who knows what the structure of our governance might look like now. But instead he cut that possibility short, pulling me into the sphere of politics, where step by step I was reshaped until I became nothing more than another dirty politician. Yet I do not hate the cult, nor am I disloyal to it. I am only selfish, he admitted, as he finished his confession. Clap clap clap. Leo's applause rang out, sharp and deliberate, as the pieces of the puzzle finally came together in his mind. He now saw the cult of ascension for what it truly was, not a council of wise leaders guiding their people, but a nest of predators locked in an endless struggle for influence, each willing to sacrifice anything, even the lives of dragon candidates, to secure their own rise. Here, the lower-ranked elders sent potential dragons on suicidal training trials, not to forge them into warriors for the glory of the cult, but to ensure that if a dragon did emerge, it would be tied to their hand and not another elder's. And for them, every life placed on the line, every youth pushed to the brink of death, was nothing more than a pawn in the race for political dominance. At the center of it all stood the first elder, the untouchable king, and every other elder clawed and scraped for his throne. Unfortunately for them, the only way to ever claim that seat was through popularity that stretched across the entire cult. But popularity did not come from governance. Nor did it come from building cities, raising standards of living, or advancing science and medicine, as those things barely registered in the eyes of the commoners. The people of the cult had been shaped from birth to believe their purpose was singular: fight, bleed, and reclaim the cult's glory. From the classroom in schools to the family home, from long-standing traditions to open demonstrations, every voice echoed the same creed: serve the dragon, destroy the righteous faction, and restore what was lost. That was all the citizens ever cared about, because it was all they had ever been allowed to care about. So in such a world, an elder's worth was judged not by his wisdom or fairness, but by the blood he spilled and the dragons he raised. The fourth elder had etched his name into history not with reforms or vision, but by orchestrating a terror strike on the Sky God Arena and parading there as the next great hope. These were the acts that stirred the masses, not decades of careful governance. It was a vicious cycle, a trap without escape. Any elder who dared to chart a different course, to speak of prosperity over vengeance, would be devoured in the next election by rivals who spoke the language of blood and dragons. And no one resisted the cycle, because the cycle defined survival itself. Leo's jaw tightened, his fists curling so hard that his knuckles turned white. So this is why the elders sabotage the dragon before he reaches his peak, he said at last, his voice low with seething fury. Because the moment a dragon grows beyond the council's grasp, he ceases to be their weapon and becomes his own master. And that is what they fear the most. Leo said, as the 12th elder lowered his gaze and nodded. Noah was on the verge of becoming a monarch, and that's exactly why I think he was killed. If he became a monarch, he would no longer be subservient to the council's whims, nor be obliged to follow their commands, which would not be a good look for them. And it is also why you having 2 monarch-level servants under you has put you in our crosshair. Currently, it's election season, so no elder wants to risk taking a big step. But I wouldn't be surprised if someone set you up in the near future. After all, a shadow dragon who has more power than the council is not good for politics. The 12th elder admitted, as Leo shook his head in disbelief. The elders' council was a cancer for the cult. They were the butchers who clipped the dragon's wings before he could fly, just because they feared not being able to catch him once he left. So they want to set me up, huh? All right, let them come, Leo said as he unsheathed his dagger and began walking menacingly towards the 12th elder. Chapter 585, Revenge Complete. An unknown holding cell, the 12th elder's POV. The 12th elder trembled at the sight of Leo walking towards him with a dagger in hand, as he had not expected this outcome. Skyshard, what are you doing? You said you wouldn't hit me if I confessed. Skyshard, shhk. Despite the 12th elder's panicked screams, Leo did not stop. Having already made up his mind to punish the elder, Leo began deliberately stabbing the man's body, each thrust measured and precise, as he struck along the same places where Luke was hit. Shhk. Shhk. Every cut was a mirror, every pierce a grim echo of what his brother had endured, until the old man's cries filled the chamber like a chorus of guilt-made flesh. But you said you wouldn't hurt me if I came clean. The elder sobbed, his voice trembling between agony and disbelief, as if clinging to the hollow promise that had never been more than a deceitful lie. I said I would think about it, Leo replied, twisting the dagger free before driving it into the next mark, and I did think about it, and I concluded that you deserve it. Shhk. The elder screamed again, thrashing uselessly against the restraints as his body convulsed, his cries echoing down the stone walls. Mu Fan and Su Pei turned away, unable to witness such grim violence, while even Dupravel averted his gaze, as he wasn't the sadistic type that gained pleasure from watching another man be tortured. However, no matter how much blood splattered, or how loud the 12th elder screamed, Leo did not stop with his punishment. He did not gloat, nor did he revel in his cruelty, as he simply carried out his movements with no hesitation, knowing full well that he was serving justice without malice or bias. Thrust, sputter, every strike he made was not simply pain, but judgment. A reminder, a ledger, one wound for every sin committed, one scar for every single one that his brother received. For 45 minutes the chamber echoed with nothing but the elder's hoarse screams, and it wasn't until the 12th elder's body finally sagged against the restraints, his head lolling unconscious, that Leo finally stopped, his blade dripping with the residue of vengeance. Gimli, Leo called evenly. The door creaked open almost immediately, and Gimli entered with hurried steps, her face pale at the grotesque sight before her, yet her hands steady as she obeyed without question. She pressed the wound-closing ointment along the elder's ravaged body and attached a saline drip to his arm, just like she had been trained to do for the last 2 weeks. However, seeing her stitch the 12th elder back up, Leo felt like something was amiss in his gut. Stop, he said, commanding Gimli to pause the treatment, as he pulled her hand away from the elder's body. I had initially planned to drag this out. To come back every few days to break him again and again, but I see now he isn't worth the effort. His screams don't satisfy me, they only waste my time. He paused, tilting his head ever so slightly as his gaze lingered on the elder's unconscious form. On one hand, I want to kill him. On the other hand, his claim that Soren might sense his death lingers in the back of my mind. The silence stretched before he gave a quiet, almost dismissive scoff. No, I don't think Soren particularly cares. If he did, the council wouldn't be filled with such scum in the first place. With that, his decision crystallized, and without any further hesitation, he raised his dagger, and in a single fluid motion severed the elder's head from his body. Splat! Thud! Blood sprayed briefly before falling still, the silence that followed heavy and absolute. Well, guess what, Gimli, you won't have to stay watch here after all. Just clean this mess up and we'll be on our way home, Leo said coldly, as he stepped out of the room with his revenge complete. Dash 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 dash. Meanwhile Soren did sense the 12th elder's death, and for a moment cast an angry glance towards planet Vorthas to see what was going on, only to be shocked when he saw Leo, Dupravel and Su Pei present at the site of the murder, with a dripping dagger in Leo's hand. For a few moments Soren simply stared, his ancient eyes narrowing ever so slightly, as he tried to piece together the reasoning behind Leo's actions. Had the boy acted out of blind rage? Was it vengeance for some personal slight? Was it tactical to achieve some hidden ambition? Or was this the first sign that Leo was beginning to harbor dangerous intentions against the cult? The questions lingered, pressing against his mind with a weight that might have troubled him centuries ago, but now only stirred a dull ache of fatigue. He thought of the countless generations of elders who had come and gone, each believing themselves indispensable, yet in the end, each proving just as flawed and corrupt as the one who came before. The 12th elder's death, whether justified or not, hardly mattered in that grander cycle, and hence he did not care enough for it. Perhaps Leo had acted rashly, perhaps not, but in either case Soren found himself unwilling to probe further. "I hope it's for the best," Soren muttered softly, leaning back in his seat as his gaze drifted from Vorthes and returned to the present. If he chose to kill, then he must live with what that choice brings. It is not my concern to coddle him, nor to avenge the weak. He exhaled, closing his eyes as the faint ripple of the elder's life force faded completely, swallowed by silence. And so Soren let the matter rest, not because he did not sense the weight behind it, but because he no longer cared enough to interfere, deciding in that moment that perhaps it was for the best. Chapter 586, An Unexpected Feeling. On his way back to the Skyshard mansion after killing the 12th elder, Leo felt his aura being in a complete disarray for reasons he could not yet understand. He could feel this complex web of emotions growing inside him, that were being suppressed by Monarch's indifference, but it was almost like Monarch's indifference was no longer functioning for him at all. Ever since he had unlocked intent and had walked further down the road of mastering the sevenfold revelation codex, it was almost like Monarch's indifference was no longer as effective as a passive skill as it used to be, as it did barely anything anymore to regulate his emotions. "It's weird, I've never seen my body give off so many colors in such a short time," Leo thought, as he observed how his body's color went from red to maroon to blue to golden and back to red again in an extremely short span of time. "Why is this happening? What's going on?" he thought, as he paused and pulled over to a side, before pulling out the sevenfold revelation codex from his storage ring. "It's blank, there are no new lessons here," he observed, as contrary to his expectations, no new lines of wisdom appeared inside the book, as apparently this wasn't a phenomenon worth guiding according to the book. "I guess I'll just ask Charles about it when I see him," he concluded for now, as he closed the codex and continued walking alongside Dupravel, Supay, Mufan and Gimli. Once he arrived back at the Skyshard mansion, Leo found his aura stabilizing as a joyous blue, as he once again became his jolly old self, that wasn't obsessed with chasing revenge. He then pardoned Mufan, and gave her the antidote to her ailing poison, while also granting Dupravel a week-long leave to visit his son, as suddenly he started to feel magnanimous for no explainable reason. It was like a massive weight had been lifted off his shoulders and he felt like the world was fine once again. But even when he felt that calm, that magnanimity, he somehow did not feel complete. It was as if his body was suddenly able to quantify emotions, and he was just realizing that happiness was probably not as important of an emotion as he had believed it to be. That although he was happy at this moment, with his family, and although he was happy to see them safe, it wasn't as satisfying for him on a personal level as the time when he was chasing that same revenge. Is my head straight? What is this clarity I'm feeling all of a sudden? Leo wondered, as for the first time in his life, he began to question whether he could ever turn into the next version of his retired father. Walking hand in hand with his mother in the garden, tending to the little joys of home and hearth. He loved his family, yes, and he knew he could give everything up for them in an instant, but deep down he knew he was not the man who wanted to spend a lifetime inside these walls, doing nothing but tending to flowers or playing the role of a dutiful son. Because that wasn't him. He was not a domestic man, and at his core he now understood that he never could be. He saw the truth about himself now. The truth about how all his life, he had always mistaken his hunger for growing stronger as a duty, because only if he was strong could he protect what he cared, when in truth, he just enjoyed the process of getting stronger. It was an instinct for him. It was an identity. He did not fight and train so hard only because he had to protect, but because without it he felt incomplete. Because although he was happy when he was home, he was only alive when he was a warrior. Alive in the chaos, alive in the blood, alive in the never-ending struggle to grow sharper, stronger, faster than the world around him. And as that realization settled into him like iron, Leo understood why even though he was happy today, he did not feel complete. Because while for his entire life he had believed that it was his family that completed him, it was only today that he realized that it was not. And it was quite a shocker for him to accept. Why today? What's going on today that's making me feel this way? He wondered, as he accidentally completely zoned out, becoming self-absorbed in his thoughts. Amanda, walking quietly beside him, tilted her head as she noticed the faraway look in his eyes. Leo, she called softly, her voice careful, almost like she was afraid of pulling him out of something important. But when he didn't respond, she only let out a small smile and slipped her hand just briefly against his arm before pulling away. You're somewhere else again. I'll wait until you come back. She chuckled faintly under her breath, though her eyes lingered on him with warmth rather than frustration, before moving a little ahead to give him space. Meanwhile Su Yang's POV, the interstellar circuits. This is it folks, the last match, Captain Su Yang from Rodova against rookie Yulei of Geneva. Can Yulei turn around Geneva's 4-1 deficit? Derek asked, as Lee clicked his tongue in disagreement. Looks unlikely Derek, Captain Su Yang is unstoppable today, 3 wins already and this might just be his 4th in a row. Lee said, as Su Yang began with his ever-domineering performance. Shing, shing, indomitable slash, kaboom, ooh, what a mighty blow. I don't think Yulei is getting up from that. It's a victory for Rodova. Su Yang wins it all the way for them. Lee said happily, as Su Yang raised his fists in glory. Su Yang, Su Yang, Su Yang. The crowd chanted his name, however, Su Yang did not care for them, as he just closed his eyes, and imagined how Leo was standing here just a year ago, basking in the attention of the same crowd. Clench. He clenched his fists, his anger flaring, as he opened his eyes and looked towards the sky. Academy's over my friend. I guess I'll see you soon, he muttered, before turning to face the flood of teammates that were running onto the arena to congratulate him. End of Volume 5, Chasing a Shadow. See you all in Volume 6, The Second Great Betrayal. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Chapter 587, Seeds of Envy. Timeless Assassin Volume 6, The Second Great Betrayal. Betrayal is not born in the shadows, but in the light of trust. A knife in the back only hurts because once, that hand was used to hold you steady. The cruelest traitors are never the strangers at your gate, but the brothers you ate with, the fathers you honored, the lovers who swore eternal loyalty. And when betrayal comes, it is not a single act, but a rewriting of history itself, for what was once truth becomes a lie, what was once sacred becomes profane, and the names of the guilty and innocent are switched in the annals of memory. In the end, betrayal is not merely the breaking of bonds. It is the birth of a new order, forged from the ashes of trust. Archivist Lyron Day, On the Nature of Faith and Treachery, 12th Cycle Edition. Planet Ixtal, The Lost Forest, Soren and Calith's POV, 2,500 years ago. Creek. Rustle. For a few moments, the only sound in the backyard training field was the gentle hum of cicadas and the soft sway of leaves against the castle walls of Ixtal. The twin moons overhead cast their pale light upon the grounds, bathing the sparring circle in silver, as 2 brothers faced one another with blades drawn, their breathing steady but their eyes sharp. On one side stood Calith, his stance calm and balanced, the posture of someone who had fought this duel 1,000 times before and had triumphed in each of them. On the other side stood Soren, restless energy coursing through his veins, lips pressed into a thin line as he tried to smother the grin tugging at his mouth. Their father sat upon the stone bench at the edge of the field, one leg folded over the other, chin resting lightly on his hand. He looked not like a ruler, nor like the most feared assassin the universe had ever known, but like a father watching his sons learn to shape their destiny. Caliph, his voice came low and measured, steady as flowing water, tighten your stance. You are overconfident, and overconfidence is the first crack in any fortress. Caliph adjusted without hesitation, planting his feet more firmly into the soil, his blade held with renewed precision. Soren, their father continued, his gaze shifting, stop trying to force your way through. Use your head. You are not stronger, nor faster than Caliph, but you are not without tools of your own. Soren gave a quick nod, his eyes flashing, as if those words had given him license to try something bold. The spar resumed. Caliph moved first, his blade igniting in a streak of black fire as he whispered the word, dark flame. The air shimmered with heat, the very grass beneath his feet curling and blackening, as he brought the weapon down in a decisive arc meant to end the match before it began. Soren raised his own blade, coating it too in dark flame, sparks erupting as the weapons clashed, the unstoppable fire colliding with its twin. Shing! The force rang out across the courtyard, shaking the wooden training dummies nearby. Too slow, Soren, Caliph muttered, pressing forward with relentless strikes, every movement practiced, every cut leaving no room for error. He had always been the stronger, always the steadier hand. For 16 long years since the two of them began sparring, victory had been his birthright, but recently the gap between them had started to narrow as Soren started to mature. Parry. Push. Soren grimaced, parrying another blow before his body blurred into sudden speed as he invoked enhance, his arms and shoulders swelling with a rush of strength that let him push Caliph back. For a heartbeat he believed the momentum was his, until Caliph responded in kind, enhancing his legs instead, sliding to the side with impossible agility before carving another flaming strike across Soren's guard. Predictable, Caliph whispered, sparks dancing between them as their blades locked. But Soren only grinned, teeth clenched, eyes shining with something his brother had not yet seen in him before. He disengaged, stepping back, then suddenly surged forward. His body blurring, as in that instant he seemed to vanish from sight altogether, invoking a move he had recently learned called the fade step. To Caliph's eyes, his brother had dissolved into the night air, the faint shimmer of heat and flame swallowed by shadows. Caliph pivoted, blade raised high, trying to anticipate the illusion, but he anticipated wrong, as Soren did not appear from above him, but rather behind. Slash! Soren attacked with perfect precision, his blade angled low, sweeping toward Caliph's exposed side, while Caliph spun to defend, but the faintest hesitation, the single breath of disbelief that his younger brother had finally caught him off guard, cost him dearly. His block came a fraction too late, and Soren's weapon tapped firmly against his ribs. The sound echoed like thunder in Caliph's ears, as he was pushed back with a shallow cut. FSSHHH. His feet dragged in the sand, as he looked towards his brother in disbelief. I win. I finally won against Big Brother. Soren shouted, laughing with breathless joy, as he lowered his weapon and began chuckling like there was no tomorrow. In 16 years, Caliph had never lost a spar against his younger brother, as day after day, year after year, Caliph had trained harder, struck faster, defended better, endured longer. Soren had been the one always catching up, always reaching but never grasping. Yet tonight, in the silver glow of the twin moons, he had done it. He had won. But Caliph was not jealous. Not yet. He felt no malice as he lowered his blade, no hatred as his brother's laughter rang across the field. If anything, he felt a strange sense of pride that Soren had finally managed to push past his limits. And then their father rose. The sound of his slow, deliberate clap echoed through the field, each strike of his hands louder than the cicadas, louder than the rustling leaves, louder than the disbelief beating in Caliph's heart. He walked to the center of the sparring ground, his robe trailing against the grass, his presence filling the circle with a gravity neither brother could resist. He stopped before Soren, resting one calloused hand upon his son's shoulder, and then he pulled him into a tight embrace. You, Soren, their father said, his voice warm in a way that Caliph had never quite heard before. You have the potential to surpass even me as a warrior someday, my son. Ha ha ha. The laugh was full, unrestrained, genuine. The pride in his eyes was unmistakable, glowing like fire, fierce and unyielding. And it was in that moment, as Caliph stood a few steps away, blade still in hand, the sweat cooling on his brow, that something inside him cracked. His father had never said those words to him. Not once. No matter how many times he trained until his hands bled, no matter how many times he defeated Soren, no matter how many hours he spent perfecting every form, every strike, every stance, his father had never once told him he could surpass him. Soren had beaten him once. Once, in 16 years. Yet for that single victory, he was embraced, praised, elevated beyond measure. Caliph's chest tightened as he lowered his gaze, the roar of his father's laughter ringing in his ears like mockery. He forced himself to remain silent, to swallow the bitterness rising in his throat, but the words carved themselves into the marrow of his being. Why not me? Why never me? That night, he said nothing. He walked away from the training field with his head bowed, his blade dragging faintly against the grass, the laughter of his father and the joy of his brother echoing behind him. But within his heart, the first seed of jealousy had been planted. It was small then, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A root of envy, curling deep into the soil of his soul, waiting for the years to pass and the storms to come. And when it finally bloomed 300 years later, after countless such small incidents occurred, it bore the fruit of betrayal. The great betrayal. In the form of Caliph claiming his father's life, forever altering the destined course of history and the cult. Chapter 588, The All Gods Summit begins. Present day, 3 months after the execution of the 12th Elder, somewhere in space. Today was an important day in the history of the universe, for today was the day the once-in-a-century All Gods Summit took place inside the ancient gods' pavilion. Today, every righteous faction god flew from all over the universe to gather at the floating asteroid that housed the ancient pavilion, the designated spot for their rare and sacred meeting. The pavilion itself drifted across the stars without tether or trajectory, its origin long forgotten, its destination never questioned, as the divine laws that governed its movement remained known only to the eternal sovereign who claimed its head seat. Shaped like an open lotus carved from cosmic stone, the structure appeared deceptively fragile from afar, yet radiated a pressure that made even monarch tier beasts avoid its presence in instinctive fear. Inside the pavilion's grand chamber, 10 thrones were arranged around a glimmering circular table of star crystal, each one carved for a god, each humming faintly with its occupant's essence. And today, just like always, 9 of those 10 seats were occupied by the righteous faction gods, while the one saved for Soren remained empty. At the head of the circle sat Caliph, the eternal sovereign, his presence domineering and impossible to ignore, as he sat with his eyes half open. Cloaked in robes spun from folded light and woven mana, Caliph looked neither old nor young, neither mortal nor divine, as he seemed to simply be, like all eternal things tended to be. Timeless. To his right slouched Morris the Deceiver, bare-chested and relaxed, with skin smooth as ice and black hair that defied gravity, swaying ever so slightly with each breath he drew. His lips remained curled in a permanent smirk, the kind that suggested he already knew how this summit would end, and found it amusing in a way that the rest did not. While to Caliph's left, sat Helmuth the Berserker, arms crossed and jaw clenched, wrapped in blood-soaked furs and silent fury, as if it took everything in him not to slam his fists into the table just to shatter the calm. The remaining 6 seats belonged to the gods of the great clans, the cornerstone families of the righteous faction whose roots stretched back to the beginning of the beast god's era. Su Ren, god of the Su family, sat with his chin raised and his gaze half lowered, as he mimicked the expression on Caliph's face. Beside him was Mu Shen, divine patriarch of the Mu clan, who sat looking extremely nervous, as he hardly remained still and constantly kept checking the room for hidden traps. Then came Dutrask, sprawled out and smirking with thinly veiled contempt, his fingers drumming against the table as if feeling impatient at how long this meeting was taking to start. Luhan sat next, arms folded within his jade-sleeved robes, his divine pressure entirely concealed, though the room instinctively treated him as the most dangerous. The final two were Ruvasa, whose every blink dripped seduction like poison, and Yukiro, sharp-eyed and silent, his divine core pulsing faintly with restrained wrath. They sat not as allies, but as predators in a cage, watching each other for cracks, betrayals, or openings, while the empty chair between them pulsed faintly, as though it too was listening, even if from afar. Dong dong. The clock struck 12 and the official time for the meeting to start began, as Kalith let out a deep sigh and glanced towards the empty seat. For the 22nd time in history, Soren has chosen not to show up to the annual All Gods Summit. So unfortunately, even this year, we cannot betray and kill him yet. Kalith began, as Morris snickered wildly at his joke. Ha ha ha. Good one. Morris complimented, as he lightly tapped Kalith on his shoulders. As discussed in the second ever All Gods Summit meeting, the proposed timeline for the 6 great clans to be subservient to the universal government for an initial period of 2,000 years has now expired, opening us up for a renegotiation of terms. That's the main agenda of this year's meeting, along with a few minor points for later. So unless someone has an objection, let's begin this century's meeting with your renegotiation demands, Kalith proposed, as he silently looked around the chamber into the eyes of the members of the 6 great clans, who already seemed to be determined on staging a revolt. A long silence followed his words, not because no one had anything to say, but because everyone was waiting for someone else to say it first. Ruvasa adjusted the golden cuff on her wrist while casting a sly glance at Yukiro, who remained as unmoving as a statue, though the subtle tremor in the star crystal beneath his fingers betrayed his restraint. Dutrask cracked his neck, clearly bored by the theatrics, while Su-Ren closed his eyes again, as if he'd already foreseen every possible outcome of this summit and found none of them worthy of concern. Kalith didn't blink. He simply sat there, unmoving, allowing the silence to stretch further, until it no longer felt like waiting, but like unbearable pressure or tangible weight. And that was when Mu Shen spoke. His voice came out softer than expected, laced with caution, yet each word carried the weight of a decision that had been simmering for far too long, like a truth rehearsed in silence over and over again. Lord Kalith, he began, glancing sideways at Dutrask and Luhan, as if seeking silent confirmation that he wasn't alone in his rebellion. With all due respect, what if we don't want to continue being a part of the Righteous Alliance anymore? He hesitated only a second, long enough for Helmuth to lift his gaze and Morris's smirk to widen. What if we want to be independent now? Mu Shen asked, as the atmosphere in the room suddenly turned heavy. Chapter 589, No Deal. Ancient Gods Pavilion. What if we want to be independent now? Mu Shen asked, as the atmosphere in the room suddenly turned heavy at his question. What did you say, you little punk? I don't think I heard you correctly. Helmuth replied instantly, as he strained his neck and glanced towards Mu Shen with a side eye. He said we want to be independent now. The 6 great clans have already decided that the current arrangement where the clans are subservient to the universal government is not good enough for us anymore. We served you for 2,000 years. But we wish to serve you no more. Su-Ren reiterated, as Helmuth felt his left eye flicker from rage. Crack, crack. Helmuth began cracking his knuckles first, before adjusting his neck muscles, as he seemed ready to fight when Kalith suddenly put an arm in front of him, as if gesturing for him to calm down for a minute. I'm sure there's no need for you people to walk out of the Righteous Alliance. After all, we have a good thing going for the past 2,000 years. Today, if you make reasonable demands, the 3 of us are more than willing to make some concessions, so please, before demanding independence, let's just try working this out. Kalith suggested, his tone still calm and polite, as unlike Helmuth he did not appear outraged by Mu Shen's statement. None of the gods belonging to the 6 great clans had expected Kalith to be so cooperative today, and hence, faced by this unexpected offer to renegotiate, they were caught slightly off guard. Dutrask looked towards Luhan, who shrugged his shoulders in response. The 2 of them now looked unsure if they wanted to declare rebellion immediately, while Mu Shen and Su-Ren looked unconvinced, and seemed like they had already made up their minds on walking out of this alliance today. Finally, while all the men at the table stayed silent, it was Ruvasa who broke the silence. Very well. Then the Ru clan wants a non-poaching agreement with the universal government. You cannot recruit talents from the Ru clan, unless we approve of them working for you first. Far too many of our talented branch clan members have been lured away by the universal government because you promise them elite-level techniques that are usually reserved for the main clan descendants back home, costing us an average of one monarch candidate per century, which is unacceptable. Ru said, her tone uncompromising, as Caliph glanced towards Morris, who nodded his head. Yeah, we can do that. We can make a pact which gives you say 100 rights to refusal every year, so you can keep the best of the best talents from your branch clans from being poached away. While we still get a steady flow of mid-level guys to run the universal army, Morris said, as Caliph nodded in agreement. Yes, that's possible. We can discuss the specifics later, but it's possible. Caliph reaffirmed, as Ruvasa looked momentarily stunned by their response. She had not expected Caliph and Morris to be so understanding, and it surprised her in a good way. Well, I want that for my clan as well, and I also want to renegotiate the yearly tribute the U clan pays to the universal government. If possible, I want to abolish it completely, but if that's not possible, I at least want it to drop by 80%. As it's absolutely ridiculous that the U clan pays you 2 to 3 trillion MP annually. Yukiro said, as he too put a condition forward. No. Morris replied immediately, as he rejected this proposal outright. Although the universal government only controls 5 major planets, the size of our military forces matches the fleet size of the 6 great clans combined. Our capital expenditure is much higher than the 6 clans, and without you all paying your fair share of tribute, we can't keep it afloat. If the clans reduce their tribute by 80%, it will mean that we will have to downsize our military by about 60 to 70%, which would significantly weaken us against the cult of ascension. Morris denied, as Luhan immediately scoffed at his remarks. The cult of ascension is no longer a threat. There is no need for you to maintain as large a fleet as you used to 1500 years ago. It's not like they have dozens of monarchs, leading divisions of ferocious fighters across the universe anymore. The cult is only alive because of Soren, and nobody has seen him make a move in over a millennium either. Luhan pointed out, as every leader of the 6 great clans agreed to his words. It is exactly like he said, we the great clans no longer fear the cult like we used to, and we see no need to pay you as large a tribute every year to maintain your overinflated army. It's time for you to downsize, and for the tribute system to be abolished. We have paid our fair share over the years, now it's time for the great clans to be financially free. Mu Shen said, as Morris chuckled at his words. The cult is no longer a threat. Why don't you ask Su Ren about it? I think he just lost a planet to them. Morris pointed out, as Su Ren felt insulted at that comment. It was an insignificant planet, losing it means nothing to us. It's barren and was only good for its mana mines, which we have depleted 80% anyways. So it's akin to junk. Which is why we did not even bother defending it properly in the first place. Su Ren said, as he stuck with the narrative that the cult was no longer a security threat. Very well, Caliph said at last, as he let out another deep sigh. We can discuss terms on how much we need to reduce the tribute by, however, I'm telling you now, that it won't go down to 20% of what it is right now. At best we can reduce it to 70% of current levels, but anything lower than that is simply impossible. Caliph conceded, however his offer did not satisfy too many. The 6 great clan members exchanged silent glances, their eyes meeting across the table as though each of them had been waiting for someone else to voice what they were all thinking. As finally, it was Yukiro who leaned forward, his voice sharp and unyielding. No, 70% is not good enough. We are not asking for minor concessions, Caliph. We are demanding reform. If the universal government wishes for the 6 clans to remain within this alliance, then the tribute must fall to 20% of its current value. Nothing less. That is the will of the clans. Ruvasa folded her arms, nodding curtly in agreement. Either you accept this condition, or the pact that has stood for 2 millennia ends today. For a moment Morris simply stared at them, the faintest of smirks tugging at his lips as silence blanketed the chamber. Then, with a dismissive wave of his hand, he finally replied. "All right then. I guess there will be no deal made today," as he, Caliph and Helmuth moved in synchronization. Chapter 590, A Battle Between Gods. "All right then, I guess there will be no deal today," Morris said, as reality fractured. It did not shatter with a bang or scream or thunderous pulse of mana, because what followed was not an attack in the traditional sense. It was a denial of linearity, a rejection of how things were supposed to unfold. The star crystal table was whole, and yet already splintered. Su Ren was seated, and already standing. Helmuth was still at Caliph's side, and yet his axe had already filled the space where Su Ren's throat once was. All cause and effect bent inward, folding like parchment caught in divine fire. In a single breath, three ancient gods moved, and the universe struggled to keep up. Morris didn't rise. He appeared, lounging mid-air, an echo of himself lingering in his chair while his true form blurred across dimensions. With one hand, he plucked Su Ren's name from the fabric of the moment, and with the other, he reached into Su Ren's future and tried to crush it before it could bloom. Helmuth exploded forward, not through space, but through intent, his clenched fist crashing toward Su Ren with the weight of 1,000 unspoken battles. Chains unraveled around his forearms like snakes given freedom, each strike coiling and recoiling through skipped frames of time, leaving behind only the shockwave of their arrival. Caliph didn't speak, nor raise a hand. He merely looked at Su Ren and removed the moment in which Su Ren would have dodged. Su Ren gasped as the floor no longer existed beneath him. Then again, maybe it never had. His divine barrier collapsed inward like glass melting under starlight, and his own essence screamed in a tongue older than creation, calling forth shields made of will, of bloodline, of memory itself. He blinked, once. Morris was in his shadow. He blinked again. Helmuth's chain was wrapped around his ribcage, not yet pulling, not yet tightening, but already committed. "Traitors," Su Ren muttered, divine blood leaking from the corner of his mouth as his form flickered between states of light and mass. "You dare." But before he could finish, Luhan moved. He didn't rise. He stood in all directions at once. Space reoriented itself around his will, restoring shape to the shattered floor and time to the broken sequence. His robes fluttered in every direction, as 6 of his shadows surged outward, each one intercepting a different thread of Morris's entropy, canceling it before it reached full manifestation. Yukiro's eyes snapped wide, his wrath igniting a golden sphere around the table as he invoked a domain of stillness that briefly froze Helmuth's advance mid-strike. Dutrask stood at last, his clumsiness gone, replaced by a scowl as he raised a single hand and whispered a command. The sound did not travel, but reality obeyed, and the chain around Su Ren's chest vanished, as the gods of the great clans did their best to support him in battle. "What is the meaning of this, Lord Caliph? I thought you had outlawed gods fighting against gods, or has that peace already shattered?" Mu Shen asked, as Caliph only responded by retrieving his father's origin metal daggers, which made his intention loud and clear. "Seriously? You fools seriously think you can take on the 6 of us together as just 3 of you?" Su Ren asked, his tone mocking, as he retrieved a weapon of his own, and assumed a proper battle stance. "3 of us? No. We are not just 3, Lord Su. We also have the support of the turncoat amongst you," Morris replied, as at that moment Dutrask suddenly changed sides and burst towards Su Ren in what was the ultimate betrayal. "You coward," Luhan said, as he chased after him through countless entropies. However, it meant that he himself could no longer focus on Caliph, Morris and Helmuth for the time being. Dutrask's betrayal tilted the battlefield instantly, as if his choice had shifted the axis of the universe itself. The moment he changed sides, balance dissolved. Morris let out a wild laugh, one that echoed forward and backward in time, as if mocking not just the present, but the very idea that the outcome could have ever been different. Luhan vanished in pursuit, his presence peeling away from the main fight like a shadow split from its source, and in that moment of his absence the frontline crumbled. As that was exactly the opening that Caliph needed. He moved not with speed, but with authority, stepping across laws that once governed reality. Every footfall rewrote cause and consequence, as the origin dagger hummed in his palm, vibrating with primal malice. Su Ren countered Kalith as best he could, however, in terms of skills he was completely outmatched. Although Kalith was not as powerful as Helmuth, nor as cunning as Morris, he was the most complete fighter of the three, just like his father the timeless assassin used to be many millennia ago. "I am not going down today," Su Ren said defiantly as divine runes surged across his skin, his bloodline roaring with all the weight of the Su family's celestial ancestry. His spear glowed with cosmic intent, as he pushed back the several domain restrictions Kalith had tried to place on him, only for him to be tied down by a dozen more as Kalith weaved realities faster than he could tear them down. Shua. At this moment, seemingly out of nowhere, Kalith managed to cut him. Only once. A shallow nick across the shoulder, so clean and fast it barely disrupted Su Ren's stance. Yet he staggered. Not from pain, but from shock. Because for the first time since he became immortal the wound did not automatically close. Not even a flicker of divine regeneration stirred. His body recognized the blade. Not as metal, not as mana, but as origin, as the first and last truth, something not meant to be survived. "You brought that cursed blade to this fight," Su Ren whispered, voice trembling in disbelief, as his left hand pressed to the wound, only to feel the divine tissue around it unravel further with each passing breath. Kalith said nothing. He simply advanced. Su Ren leapt backward, trying to gain space, but space refused to respond. Despite being embroiled in a tense battle of his own, Helmuth assisted Kalith in the hunt, as his pressure folded the battlefield around them, while Morris twisted his sense of direction, making forward feel backward and safety feel like suicide. Yukiro and Ruvasa both lunged to assist, but Morris split the moment they arrived, shattering their unity with temporal echoes that struck them in 4 different timelines at once. Ruvasa recoiled, blood trailing from a cut across her eye, while Yukiro's wrath sputtered as the gods were forced into defense. Kalith reached Su Ren again. This time, Su Ren met him fully, spear flashing in a celestial arc, calling upon thousands of years of refined technique, power, and ancestral might. Every strike had the weight of a supernova explosion behind them. But Kalith did not parry. He simply let the origin dagger move. And every time it moved, something about Su Ren faded. A memory, a pulse, a possibility. And when the final strike came, Kalith didn't slash or stab. He placed the blade into Su Ren's chest, slow and precise, like returning a puzzle piece to where it had always belonged. There was no scream, no final roar, only silence, as Su Ren's heart, divine and burning, shattered inward and extinguished itself. For the first time in 2,200 years, Kalith killed a god. And as Su Ren's lifeless form collapsed into starlight, the ancient pavilion groaned around them, as if the very laws that held the universe together had been betrayed. Chapter 591, The Only Option. Su Ren's death brought an awkward pause to the battle, as everyone cancelled their ongoing skills for just a moment to reorganize and recalibrate. The gods who remained standing did not speak. They merely watched the particles of Su Ren's divine essence dissolve into the fabric of the pavilion as a reminder of the irreversible truth that had just taken place. A god had died, not by the hands of the timeless assassin, not in a sealed plane, but here, now, in full view of his peers. Slam. Helmuth withdrew his axe, placing it over his shoulders with a heavy slam, as he stretched his neck and grinned a bloody smile. Beside him, Morris floated sideways with a half-smile, twirling lazily in the air, like a man who already knew what card the others were holding. While Kalith, as always, stood still at the center, his expression unreadable, as he finally broke the stalemate. "Do you wish to keep fighting?" he asked, voice calm, level, and impossibly heavy. "It's 4 versus 4 now. The choice is yours," he offered, as he pointed the origin dagger towards the rest. "Bahahaha." Morris burst into laughter, wild and breathless, as though the words themselves were a punchline he'd been waiting centuries to hear. "Oh, I already know what they're going to choose, Caliph, he said through gritted teeth, his voice slicing through the stillness like a blade made of mockery. They know it too. They just haven't admitted it yet. He teased, however, despite his insinuation. Luhan stepped forward bravely, his jaw clenched, his gaze locked on Caliph. Never, he said flatly, as he pointed towards the eternal sovereign. We can never trust you anymore, you father-killing snake. Luhan continued, his tone sharpening. You were an untrustworthy person back when we first met you, and you are an untrustworthy person even now. Luhan said, voice rising now, as his fury broke through the formality. I agree, Mu Shen pitched in, fists tight at his side. Me too, Yukiro joined, his rising mana indicating that he was ready to fight to the end. However, Ruvasa looked hesitant. I'm telling you, Luhan continued, turning now to the only member amongst them who looked unsure, if we back away from the challenge today, we might as well throw away the great clans, because we will be the universal government's servants for an eternity to come. He claimed, as he finally displayed the pride of divinity that each and every one of them shared. But unfortunately for him, Ruvasa did not seem to echo his anger. Her fingers tightened around her wrist as she scanned the battlefield, studying the bloodless expressions of Caliph, Helmuth, and Morris. The origin dagger still flickered faintly in Caliph's hand, and the shine of its edge unsettled her in a way she couldn't rationalize. They couldn't win. Not like this. Not when the battlefield had already shifted from strength to inevitability. And so, she took a deep breath. What guarantee do we have, she said slowly, measured and cold, that if we return to the negotiation table, you won't kill another one of us next? Her eyes narrowed. Because, as Lu pointed out, we don't trust you anymore. She asked, as the silence between them stretched. Morris. Caliph prompted, as Morris gave a long, exaggerated sigh, before rolling his eyes with theatrical flair. Oh please, he said. It's not like you trusted us 2,200 years ago either. Darling. He floated down until his feet almost touched the broken floor. We'll do what we always do. His grin widened. A soul contract. The words hung in the air like smoke. A renewal of terms for 2,000 more years of partnership. He said it sweetly. But to all four of them, it sounded like he meant to say, slavery. Caliph, Helmuth and I are still willing to make some concessions. You've served us well in the past. Faithfully. Relentlessly. He smiled like a merchant about to sell a stolen heirloom. And as an added bonus, we'll even let you discuss amongst yourselves how you'd like to loot and plunder the Sioux clan's lands. Divide them within yourselves as you wish. Consider it your reward. Clap. He clapped his hands once. All you have to do is decide within the next 5 minutes, he said casually, stretching his arms behind his head. Because if there's one thing Helmuth's not good at, it's patience. Helmuth let out a low, guttural chuckle as he agreed to Morris's words, the sound vibrating through the pavilion's pillars like a storm gathering behind shut doors, as the offer to renegotiate and distribute the Sioux family lands amongst themselves, made the four gods hesitant to attack. Sweat rolled quietly down temples. Mana flared behind tightened expressions. Each of them calculating, second-guessing, and struggling to answer the only question that mattered. Did they submit? Or did they fight to the end? Until Ruvasa folding made the choice easier for the others. Very well then, I am prepared to sign the soul contract. She said, as her decision to fold, put the other three at an overwhelming disadvantage. What about the rest of you? Caliph pressed, as it was Yukiro who surrendered to practicality next. As long as the renegotiations are reasonable. He muttered, as he lowered his weapons as well, leaving only Luhan and Mu Shen to resist. Give it up man, we can't do it alone. Mu Shen said eventually, as in the end, all four of them lowered their weapons, giving Morris a reason to smile with satisfaction. What did I tell you Caliph? The great gods had already made their choice. They just didn't wanna admit it back then, but like good boys and girls, they have now. Morris teased, as his words caused the four gods to feel their pride twist bitterly in their chests like a blade slowly being turned. None of them spoke. None of them looked at each other. Because to look was to confirm the shame. To acknowledge that they had folded, not in a position of strength, but in staggered surrender, one after the other, until defiance became nothing but a distant dream. Caliph nodded once. The origin dagger disappeared from his hand. Then let us begin, he said. And with those 4 words, history bent. The summit no longer felt like a hostile discussion, or even a negotiation. It felt like a dictation, a one-sided narration, where the victors spoke in calm, measured tones, listing out the terms of surrender as if they were doing the defeated a favor. They offered concessions the way emperors flicked crumbs to starving dogs, deliberate, generous in appearance but calculated to humiliate. And the defeated gods accepted them. Not as warriors seeking balance. Not as rulers defending legacy. But as beggars accepting spare change on a cold street corner, with their heads bowed, pride swallowed, and forced smile that barely hid the tremble beneath. Soon, with the help of Morris's magic, the pavilion lights shifted subtly, illuminating the soul contract that had formed without command, and was now waiting to be signed into a binding agreement. Ru Vasa stepped forward first, her eyes heavy. Yu Kiro followed with gritted teeth. Mu Shen dragged his feet. And Lu Han simply stood there for a moment longer, staring at the place where Su Ren had vanished, before moving without a word, 1,000 emotions clashing inside his chest. Chapter 592, Victory for Now. The 5 great gods ultimately secured terms that were marginally more favorable than the arrangement they had abided by until now, with the principal provisions of the new pact being as follows. 1. Annual rights of refusal. All talents belonging to the 5 great clans were now obligated to obtain explicit permission from their respective clans before entering the service of the universal government. Each clan was granted the authority to refuse up to 1,000 such transfers annually, thereby safeguarding their most promising members. Exception: the Du clan, who in recognition of its support, had been granted triple this allotment. 2. Reduction of annual tribute. The annual tribute owed by the clans to the universal government, previously levied for protection against the cult of ascension, had now been reduced by 20%. This adjustment stemmed from the collective assessment that the cult no longer posed the existential threat it did 2 millennia ago, thereby rendering a smaller fleet sufficient for security needs. Exception: the Du clan had been granted a 40% reduction, as recompense for supporting today's betrayal. 3. Distribution of Su clan holdings. With Su Ren dying, the foundations of the Su clan were now shattered. All assets, be they planets, territories, or talents, were now subject to redistribution among the remaining clans, to be claimed by might, merit, or stratagem. 4. Suspension of in-person assemblies. Having endured yet another act of treachery, the 5 great gods declared that they no longer placed any trust in the universal government. Consequently, all in-person conclaves, traditionally convened once per century, were suspended for the next 2,000 years, until the scheduled renegotiation of this pact. These terms, while not wholly unfavorable, were still far from sufficient for the 5 great clans, whose ambitions stretched far beyond minor concessions and temporary relief. They had entered this conclave with aspirations of full sovereignty, envisioning a future where their clans would no longer bow to the dictates of the universal government, yet what they walked away with was little more than gilded chains. The privileges granted to them were enough to soothe surface-level discontent, yet not nearly enough to satisfy hearts long inflamed with pride and hunger for dominion. For in truth, they were leaving not as free powers charting their own course, but as slightly more comfortable vassals, bound still to a distant throne that neither feared nor respected them. And as though to salt the wound, one of their most trusted allies now lay dead, his clan reduced to carrion for the others to feast upon. This pact, hence, was not a triumph, but a reminder that betrayal came cheap for the allies of Caliph and Morris, and that if they dared revolt, it would be them who would die next. Once the 5 great gods had departed, the grand chamber of the pavilion grew strangely quiet, leaving only Caliph, Morris, and Helmuth seated together beneath its towering pillars. Helmuth and Morris wore unrestrained expressions of triumph, their voices brimming with the exhilaration of victory, while Caliph alone sat with a heavy stillness, his gaze fixed on the mosaic floor. "This," Helmuth rumbled, his voice carrying like a drumbeat through the hall, "this is the most fun I've had in a millennium. To finally unleash myself, to feel the weight of my strength pressed against true resistance. I had nearly forgotten how intoxicating it feels." His immense arms flexed as he clenched his fists, veins bulging with restrained fervor, as though he were reliving every strike in his mind. Morris, slouched comfortably in his chair with his usual air of smug satisfaction, threw a laugh across the room. "I told you, Caliph. Didn't I tell you? I had this figured from the start. I knew they'd fold. I knew the moment would come. Huh. And when it did, oh, what a spectacle. We crushed them, utterly crushed them." He leaned sideways, jabbing Caliph's shoulder repeatedly with a long, pale finger, his grin widening with every word. "Outsmarted them all, big time. Tell me I wasn't right." Helmuth ignored the exchange, still wrapped in the thrill of battle. "Mortals don't realize how fortunate they are," he muttered, half to himself, half to the echoing chamber. "To clash blade against blade, to test strength against strength, to feel every bone and sinew scream with effort. For us, divinity is a prison. Centuries of silence, eternity of waiting, and when a battle comes at last, our foes are never worthy enough to even weather a single strike. Imagine living your life as a warrior with no equal. It is not glory, it is torment." Morris rolled his eyes, waving a hand dismissively. "Spare us your tragic poetry, you oversized brute. We all know you're obsessed with smashing things. No need to dress it up as philosophy." His tone shifted as his gaze slid toward Caliph, who remained immobile, his expression taut and unreadable. "Hey," Morris said more quietly, nudging Helmuth with a sharp elbow. "Look at him. He doesn't look happy at all." Helmuth finally turned, his grin fading as his eyes narrowed. Together, both gods regarded Caliph, who had not moved a muscle since the others began celebrating, his silence pressing heavier than the pavilion's ancient columns. What is wrong with you?" Helmuth asked, as Caliph finally regained his wits, but his expression worsened even more. "Today's fight. It ended so quickly, even though it was a 4-on-5 fight. We had the upper hand from the start to end," Caliph said, as Helmuth and Morris rejoiced at his words. "Hell yeah, we had the upper hand. It was my strategy after all." Morris said. "So what if we were outnumbered? I alone can take on 3 gods." Helmuth added. But Caliph's frown never improved. "None of us picked up an injury today, nor were we ever pushed back. Yet, 2,200 years ago, when we tried to kill my brother after we had already killed my father, even with the 9 of us attacking him at once, we could not kill him after a fight that lasted 2 days. And by the end, it was all of us who were exhausted, but he was still roaring to go on." Caliph pointed out, as dark memories surfaced in everyone's mind. He never asked the question aloud. He never asked just how strong Soren really was, because he felt he did not have the courage to hear the answer. Even though they were all gods, Soren had always been in a league of his own. And yet, despite Soren's incredible strength, he was never once able to make their father sweat in a spar, even up until the day their father died. So the thought that lingered in Caliph's mind was a darker one. Just how strong had their father, the timeless assassin, truly been in his prime? And what was it that made him so fearsome, even though they were all at the same power tier? "Hey, there's no point brooding over the past," Morris cut in eventually, as he tried to lift up the mood. "We won, Caliph. That's what matters. Victories this clean don't come often, so let's savor it." Helmuth laughed. Brother. Celebrate first. Worry later. And even if you think Soren is strong, don't worry about him, for I'm sure that I'm stronger." He reassured, as Caliph finally let out a long sigh, before letting out a soft grin. They had indeed won today. Everything had gone as planned. The righteous alliance was still intact. Chapter 593, Recap 1. The Cult of Ascension, a 3-month recap. A week before the All Gods Summit took place, another major event unfolded within the universe, as the once-in-a-decade Elder elections took place within the cult. After 3 decades of predictable results and not many planets changing hands, this time's elections were groundbreaking as several elders lost their seats outright, while others found their influence slipping through their fingers like dry sand. Of course, as was tradition, the first, second, third, and fourth elders remained untouched. Their planetary dominion stayed intact, their ranks remained preserved through the sheer weight of legacy, influence, and undisputed authority. No candidate dared to challenge them seriously, and even if they had, the outcome would not have changed. However, for the rest of the council, chaos reigned. The fifth elder lost the elections in 2 of his territories and was consequently demoted to eighth elder, his pride wounded and his reputation fractured. The sixth elder, in contrast, expanded his domain by 1 additional planet and ascended to the new rank of fifth elder. The seventh elder endured an even harsher blow, losing control of all but 1 of his assigned planets and was reclassified as the new 10th elder. While the 8th, 9th, and 10th elders suffered complete electoral collapse. Each of them losing everything including their respective home elections, and being stripped clean from the council roster altogether. As in their place, new blood emerged, ambitious, hungry, and eager to carve their mark into the legacy of the cult. But amidst the rise and fall of so many figures, one name achieved much more success than the rest. The 12th elder, aka Chaosbringer. Having taken over the identity of the 12th elder, his star rose with staggering speed as his popularity skyrocketed in the aftermath of his now famous confrontation with Dupraval Nuna. The 12th elder's decision to protect the dragon candidate and stand his ground against Dupraval ignited support from other planet commoners who viewed him as a man of action, not just rhetoric. The cult admired boldness. They revered narrative. And Chaosbringer offered both. So with the 12th elder's story and his own relentless charm on the campaign trail, he managed to win 3 new planets this election cycle, securing a promotion as the new 7th elder of the cult. No longer the runt of the council, he now held tangible weight within the political ecosystem. And although he was still leagues away from the power of the top 4, he was no longer the deadweight many considered the 12th seat to be. However, his rise came with immediate friction. Before Chaosbringer could consolidate influence or even convene with his new allies, the first elder pushed through a motion to launch yet another planetary conquest. The proposal was sudden, almost predatory in timing, coming just a day after the elections concluded. And while Chaosbringer might have liked to raise objections or delay the vote, his recent promotion left him politically vulnerable, still earning his footing among peers who had watched him ascend from obscurity. The proposal passed with a majority. And the very next morning, a new directive was issued. Leo and Ver were to prepare for a fresh conquest. Target: Planet Nemo. Timeline: 1 month from now. Leo's recap: past 3 months. A lot had happened over the past 3 months for Leo as well, but the most important development in his life was that he, alongside Ver, had mastered 2 new forbidden techniques. One was taught by the 10th elder. The other by the 9th. The first was a versatile skill, a brutal countermeasure that reshaped how Leo handled searching for battle openings and was called mana disruption. By channeling a refined pulse of mana into the air and vibrating it at a precise frequency, Leo could momentarily destabilize the mana field around him within a 5-meter radius. The result was instantaneous. Anyone caught inside the radius would then find their ability to gather, circulate, or control mana temporarily severed. And although the disruption only lasted 2 to 3 seconds, that brief pause was enough to disable critical opponents' skills. It was not flashy. It did not maim or kill. But it could silence a domain, stop a charged spell, or cause a critical technique to collapse mid-cast. And as an added bonus, it was also the perfect technique to break through unbreakable mana defensive barriers, as it could disable those protective spheres as well. In contrast, the second move he learned was entirely offensive. Fade Step. A feint disguised as a finishing blow, it allowed Leo to appear as if he were lunging forward in a final charge, only to vanish from the enemy's line of sight just before impact, and reappear behind them mid-strike to deliver a near unblockable attack. It was a move that bypassed not just sight, but all conventional forms of perception, cutting straight through enhanced senses, motion tracking, and even perception spells like absolute vision. It exploited the narrow window between recognition and reaction, turning it into a blind spot. To the enemy, Leo would seem to flicker out of existence, only to be felt half a second later, at their back, blade drawn. It was fast, it was brutal, and it was difficult to stop. But like all forbidden techniques, it came at a cost. He could only perform the move twice in rapid succession. Beyond that, the spatial folding began to strain his nervous system, leading to vertigo, nausea, or blurred vision for up to several seconds. Simply because his current Grandmaster-level body was still too fragile to handle more. Even so, he had not lost a single sparring match since mastering it. Together, Mana Disruption and Fade Step redefined how Leo approached combat. One was a precise tool of control. The other, a phantom blade of execution. And with both now etched into his muscle memory, Leo found himself growing to become a much more stable warrior that had very little glaring weaknesses left to exploit in battle. Chapter 594, A Big Issue. Leo's recap, continued. Although on the warrior front, things seemed to be going well for Leo, the same could not be said about his emotional state, as it had been a mess ever since he killed the 12th Elder 3 months ago. The first time when he noticed his unstable state, he attributed it to finally gaining clarity in his life on what he considered important. However, the prolonged emotional swings made him wonder if that theory was right. Almost every day, he saw his aura swinging from red, to maroon, to blue to pink, and he could not understand why. It was as if he suddenly had no control over his emotional state whatsoever, and it bothered him very much that this was the case. At first he tried to ignore it, as despite his emotional state fluctuating, he still had a clear head and could focus on the task at hand. However, as time progressed, his condition only grew increasingly worse until he found himself unable to focus on a single task at all. Fade Step became the first technique that Ver mastered before him, not because he found it to be particularly complicated, but because his mind refused to focus on practicing it. It was in that moment that he realized that he had to confront his wavering emotions before they spiraled into something far worse, and hence decided to visit Charles at once. Present day, Planet Juxta, Leo's POV. Lord Fatherrrr. Came a cry almost as soon as he stepped onto the Juxta military base, as Dumpy came flying towards his direction and stuck straight on his face. Plop. Lord Father, I have missed you so much, the smoking man has tortured me too much. It's too much. My belly fat is now gone because of him. I'm a lean frog now. If I try to find a mate, she will think I'm a bad hunter and can't feed myself properly. She won't marry me now. Lord Father, I'm going to die a virgin. Dumpy complained, as Leo pulled him off his face and placed him on his shoulders. You look strong, Dumpy, I can sense your powerful aura. I'm proud of you. Leo replied, as he ignored all other complaints and only focused on the fact that Dumpy had grown stronger since the last time he met him. Well, look who finally decided to visit Juxta again, ladies and gentlemen. Charles said when he saw Leo approaching, as all the lieutenants and soldiers around Charles stopped what they were doing and cast a friendly glance towards Leo. Are you lost, boy? Were you planning to visit Vorthas, but accidentally arrived on Juxta? Charles teased, as Leo chuckled at his question. I've missed you too, Commander. He replied, as Charles brought out a cigarette from his pocket and lit it up. Huff. So boy, how long do you plan to be here? You have a lot of technical knowledge to catch up on. I wasn't done turning you into a proper military commander before you left for your last deployment. Charles asked, as Leo let out a troubled sigh. The esteemed council has already assigned a new mission to me, Commander. I'll be off to conquer Nemo in a month. Leo replied, as Charles raised a cautious eyebrow. Did they have a concrete plan? Or is this a whim deployment? He asked, as Leo shrugged his shoulders in response. I don't know. Last I was informed, scouts are working overtime on Nemo trying to bring us useful information on how to disable the planetary shield, but I haven't heard any good news yet. He shared, as Charles exhaled a long drag from his cigarette. Idiots. Charles muttered, as Leo rubbed the back of his neck and wondered how to broach the important topic he was really here for. Can we talk in private for a while, Commander? There's something I need to tell you. He requested sheepishly, as Charles carefully studied the concerned expression on his face. Of course, boy, follow me to my cabin. He replied, as Leo followed in tow. Inside Charles's private cabin. What is it, boy? What do you want to talk about in private? Charles asked, watching as Leo clutched at his hair in frustration. It's my emotional state, Commander. It's been unstable for the past 3 months. My aura changes color every half hour, and it's starting to affect my focus. Lately, I've been feeling like a drug addict. I'm either too happy and carefree or too crushed by despair. There's no balance, and I can't figure out why. Leo confessed, his voice tight with strain. The moment the words left his mouth, all color drained from Charles's face. How long have you been facing this problem, boy? 3 months, you said. His tone turned grave, as Leo nodded in confirmation. Motherfucker. Charles snarled, slamming his fist on the table. Bang. We need to hurry, boy. This is serious, he said, as for the first time Leo could hear panic edging into his voice. What's so serious? Leo asked, his innocence clashing with the weight in Charles's eyes. Your soul has started to outgrow your body, boy. Your vessel is no longer strong enough to contain it. This only happens when a warrior destined to ascend long ago is still shackled to a lower tier. It is your body's way of warning you that you must ascend quickly. If we don't act soon, you may suffer an episode that will scar your foundations permanently. Charles explained, as Leo felt a chill crawl down his spine as those words sank in. He had no idea that his emotional swings were symptoms of something so important, or else he wouldn't have waited 3 months to tell Charles about it. Where are you lacking for your promotion? Why haven't you already become a transcendent? Charles asked, as Leo thought about every criteria needed to ascend, before pointing out the only field where he still had improvement left to make. It's my meditation manual. The Sevenfold Revelation Codex is the only aspect I haven't mastered for promotion. Everything else is done: skills, mental threshold, mana threshold, physical threshold. The only thing left for me to master is intent, and I don't think I can rush mastering that. Leo replied with a troubled voice, as Charles grew even more pale. This was more problematic than he thought. Chapter 595, Means to an End. Planet Juxta, the military base, Charles's office. Charles looked genuinely distressed as he tried to rack his brain on how to help Leo ascend faster. The current state Leo had entered was called existential overload, and it was a problem that most average warriors would never face in their life. Leo was currently facing this problem only because his current power levels were going beyond the thresholds of what his body could handle as a unit, and he needed to stabilize it fast, or pay heavy consequences for it. I still don't understand why you picked that fucking manual. Who the fuck learns about aura at the Grandmaster stage? Most monarchs I know don't master it at all. And they're monarchs for fuck's sake. Of course your body was going to go into existential overload. You are too fucking talented for your own good. Charles complained, as his panic hindered Leo's ability to think clearly as well. Shrouded in a thick aura of maroon, Leo felt 10 times the frustration that Charles did at this moment, as he carried an overwhelming bitterness towards the creator of this manual and how difficult it was to master. Boy, you have learnt the second elder's secret method. Haven't you? Charles asked eventually, as Leo nodded in agreement. It's time to use it, boy, there is no time to delay. I have a few enemy spies captured here on planet Juxta. Suck out their life essence and use it to speed up your breakthrough. You have already spotted intent for one color, and should hence be able to spot intent for all colors pretty quickly if you enhance your comprehension using life essence. Charles advised, as Leo looked at him with reluctance. But if I use that move even once, it will hinder my natural talent for life. I will then need to be dependent on life essence forever to produce the same results. Is that really worth the trade? Leo asked, as Charles nodded decisively. I don't see another choice, boy. Also, it will only hinder your ability to master aura in the future. But with you already completing the sevenfold Revelation Codex, you will be halfway to complete aura mastery already. It's not the worst choice to make, especially considering how you are not using the essence of life to enhance your mind or body. Charles suggested, as Leo took his advice under serious consideration. On one hand, he really did not wish to rely on such underhanded methods for fast growth. However, on the other hand, he knew he had no other choice given the circumstances. Hence, after thinking about it for a few minutes, he reluctantly nodded at the end. Very well, Commander, I will trust your advice on this. Leo said, as Charles threw him a concerned grin. Attaboy. He cheered, before starting to walk out of his office. Follow me to the holding cell, we will kill a few prisoners, but I don't want anyone finding out that the Shadow Dragon did this. So wait till I clear everyone out of the building first before starting. Charles said considerately, as he led Leo straight to the military prison. Once Charles got the prison empty, Leo got to work. The first prisoner blinked in confusion when the door opened, his brows furrowed as he tried to make sense of why the guards had suddenly abandoned their posts and why the infamous Shadow Dragon himself was stepping inside. What is this? He muttered, suspicion creeping into his voice. Why would they send you here? Have I been scheduled for interrogation? Or is this some sort of psychological test? His tone hardened as he straightened his back, trying to mask uncertainty with defiance. Leo gave no reply. He crossed the space in silence, his dagger flashing once across the man's throat. Slit. The prisoner's confusion turned into a wet gasp as blood poured down his chest, his hands clawing at the wound in a futile attempt to stop the flow. Catch. Before the body could hit the ground, Leo pressed his palm against it, watching as a strange gray fog escaped through the man's mouth, eyes, and ears and into his palm. The life essence swirled upward before spreading like a cold current through his nerves and settling into the tattoo at his back. The tingling sensation left a faint chill beneath his skin, but his face remained calm and detached through it all. When Leo stepped out with the dagger still dripping blood, the atmosphere of the prison shifted. The second prisoner, who had been sitting idly on the edge of his cot, went pale at the sight. His eyes darted to the crimson blade, then to Leo's expressionless face, and terror replaced every ounce of composure he had. He scrambled forward on his knees, pressing his forehead against the floor. Please. I beg you, do not do this. I was forced into this life. I have a wife, children, they depend on me. I will tell you everything I know, every contact, every safe house. Just let me live. His words spilled out in a frantic rush, trembling with desperation. Leo entered without hesitation, grabbed the man by the collar, and thrust the dagger into his heart. Blurb. The prisoner choked, clutching at the blade as his voice broke into sobs. The moment before death came, Leo pressed his palm flat against his chest. Once again, the gray fog burst free, spilling from eyes, mouth, and ears, twisting violently before being sucked into Leo's body. The tingling this time was sharper, racing like needles beneath his skin before sinking into the tattoo, and the prisoner's eyes this time went glassy after he was done, as if he had sucked away his very soul. By the time Leo reached the third cell, panic had already spread through the criminals. The man inside threw himself against the bars, his face contorted with rage that could not hide the fear behind it. You bastard! He screamed, pounding the metal. Feeding off bound men, that is all you are. A coward who is as dirty as the evil cult he serves. If you're man enough, try giving me a weapon and engaging me in a fair fight. I'll chop your dick off and feast on it if you do. Come on. If you're man enough, give me a weapon. I will drag your soul with me to the grave. Leo opened the door without breaking stride. The prisoner swung wildly at him, desperate for even a scratch of resistance, but Leo caught his wrist and twisted until the bone cracked. Crack. Scream. As the man howled, Leo plunged the dagger into his stomach and drove him to the floor. His curses dissolved into agonized screams as Leo pressed his palm down, forcing the essence out. The gray fog surged violently, as though resisting, before being devoured into Leo's veins. The tattoo pulsed faintly at his back as his body shuddered under the rush. He rose calmly as the man's final breath rattled out, not a flicker of guilt or hesitation in his eyes. By the time he approached the fourth cell, there was no pretense left. The prisoner had already collapsed to his knees, his face wet with tears as he muttered broken prayers under his breath. His hands shook uncontrollably, clutching the air as if invisible mercy might still descend to spare him. But Leo slaughtered him without emotion. For Leo, the death of these prisoners meant nothing to him. For him, they were just means to an end. Chapter 596, A Big Breakthrough. Juxta Military Base, Prison Cell, Leo's POV. After killing about 24 prisoners, Leo finally felt like his tattoo could not hold any more essence, and hence he paused with his killing and focused on utilizing it instead. Sitting cross-legged on the cold prison floor, he placed his blood-stained dagger beside him and shut his eyes, allowing the residual screams of the dead to fade into silence. The tattoo on his back pulsed faintly, as though eager to release its harvest, while Leo himself focused on guiding it gently, as he circulated it along the tattooed pathways. He sent the first streams of gray fog upward, behind his eyes, where he pulled mana on the regular to sharpen his ability to perceive aura. The sensation was strange, like pouring liquid fire directly into his vision, but instead of pain there was clarity. Threads of intent began to unravel before him, as suddenly, threads of maroon, blue, red and blue burst before him. Each thread shimmered uniquely, and each carried its own story. The maroon thread was dense, surrounding him like a cloak of suffocating weight, as there were at least a couple dozen maroon threads in his vicinity. Whoa, what is this? Leo wondered, as he followed one of the maroon threads to its source and found out that it shot out of a dead prisoner's body. Leo mused, as he reached out and tried to touch the intangible thread with his hands. Swoop. Naturally, he could not hold the thread as if it were a physical object, however, when his hand briefly passed through it, he could feel a bit of the frustration that the prisoner felt right before dying. Frustration with his superiors at the righteous faction who never came to rescue him after he was captured. Frustration at himself for being caught. Frustration for not having lived a fulfilling life. As he could feel the man having died with a lot of regrets. I see it now, I can see their frustration. Leo mused, as he saw the dozens of maroon threads around him, and as he touched each one, he could feel a sliver of the emotions that the thread owners felt. However, while all other victims that he killed felt either frustration or killing intent during their last moments. There was one particularly sickly and pale prisoner that only felt relief, his body being the only one to give birth to a blue intent cord instead of a red or maroon, and as Leo touched it, he could feel the joy the man felt at finally being set free. The joy of not having to wake up with aching bones and empty stomach every day. The joy of finally gaining eternal sleep, as Leo couldn't help but squat down and close his open pupils when he felt his story. Sleep well, my friend, Leo said, before turning his attention to the pink thread in his vicinity, which connected prisoner number 10 and 11 that he killed. He was oblivious to their love affair when he killed them individually, however, he could see it now when he touched the pink thread connecting their dead bodies. A love affair that began in prison, with the guy sliding some of his food into her prison cell after she received a rough beating from the guards, as a gesture to show that he cared. And her reciprocating the same a week later when it was the guy who was beaten black and blue. It was an unlikely love story. One that started when nobody was watching. One where the two lovers had never even held hands. However, the love they felt for one another was still true, and it pinched Leo's heart to have killed such a cute couple. My mastery of this skill has definitely gone up a notch. Using just a little bit of a life essence, gave me a breakthrough in understanding the codex that would have taken me a year or more to otherwise achieve, Leo concluded, as he finally realized just how powerful the Second Elder's forbidden method really was. The drawbacks were obvious, however, for the first time one used it, the improvement it provided was truly unparalleled. A forbidden skill for sure. He mused, as he pulled out the sevenfold revelation codex from his storage ring to get a confirmation on his progress. Shine. Golden ink began to shine at his face the moment he opened the manual, as new text began appearing on the blank pages. Dash 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 dash. Greater than, you have witnessed the threads of joy, of frustration, and of love, and have hence taken another step beyond the veil of aura into the shadowed realm of intent. Dash 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 dash. Leo smiled slightly. It seemed like using life essence did not count as cheating in the eyes of the codex, which still acknowledged his achievement. Dash 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 dash. Greater than, intent is no longer hidden from you. You do not merely see what they feel, you now see what they mean. And meaning, once revealed, can never be unseen. Dash 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 dash. The codex said ominously, as Leo tightened the grip on his dagger without thought. Dash 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 dash. Greater than, now comes the question. What will you do with this sight? Will you ignore the cords you draw from others, pretending they are not yours to bear? Or will you let them coil around your spirit, letting them shape you into something that belongs more to them than to yourself? Dash 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 dash. Dash 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 dash. Greater than, for every thread you glimpse, you drink a portion of its truth. The joy you see may not be yours, yet it seeps into you. The frustration you sense may not be yours, yet it rattles in your chest. The love you uncover may not be yours, yet it weighs upon your heart as though it were. Dash 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 dash. Leo exhaled sharply, annoyed at how the codex always twisted revelation into accusation. Dash 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 dash. Greater than, if you claim mastery, can you remain untouched by what you witness? Or will you find, in the end, that you are nothing more than a tapestry of stolen chords, intent not your own, yet shaping every motion of your hand? Dash 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 dash. The golden haze thinned, the script curling into its final riddle. Dash 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 dash. Greater than, you see intent now. But intent also sees you. Will you remain as you are, or will you be rewritten by the very truths you claim to perceive? Dash 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 dash. The codex warned before turning blank once again, as it gave Leo a serious warning to think upon. Will I be rewritten by the very intent I see and feel? He wondered, as he thought about how he felt a pinch of regret about killing those two lovers after he felt their story versus how he felt nothing beforehand. For him it was easy to kill people he wasn't attached to, or whose story he did not know. But if in the future, he was going to be shown a part of the memory of all those he slayed, then maybe he wouldn't be as indifferent to killing them anymore. We'll see how this affects me later. For now what's more important is to perceive the 3 remaining intent chords and chasing that promotion to transcendent tier. Leo reminded himself, as he rushed out of the prison, eager to share his progress with Charles and make a plan on how to perceive the remaining intent chords. Chapter 597, The Curse of Mastering Black Intent. Juxta Military Base, a few minutes later. What? You perceived 3 intent colors at once? Charles asked, as he clutched his own hair in disbelief. He had never heard of anyone ever grasping 3 intent colors at once, as usually it took one decades of comprehending a single color before they could see its intent chord. Yet, Leo had somehow managed to perceive 3 of them at once. It's good. It's very good, definitely solves a lot of our problems, he encouraged, as he began racking his brain on how to help Leo perceive the 3 remaining intent chords he still lacked to complete his mastery. Black, I'll help you perceive it. Black is the easiest intent chord to perceive, and if you have seen red, blue, maroon and pink, I'm sure the breakthrough for black will come effortlessly for you. So let's not worry about black, Charles said, as he retrieved a cigarette from his pocket and nervously lit it up. The problem definitely is green and golden, because coming across both those intent chords is more circumstantial than comprehension. He continued, as he recalled how he had witnessed golden and green intent, and how it had taken him over a century to come across the opportunity to see either. Don't sweat it, boy, I'm still here. I'll figure out a way, so what if it's next to impossible? Charles grumbled, as Leo raised his eyebrow in confusion. But I'm not sweating, in fact I'm not saying anything at all. He protested, as Charles glared at him in response. Hush boy, I told you to not worry. Now shut up and let me think. I'll find a way. I will, won't I? He mused, as towards the end the statement began sounding more like a question than an answer. Green, I know where to show you Green, but can I bring you to him? And reveal his true condition to you? Charles wondered, as he shook his head in disappointment. On one hand, he knew exactly where to show Leo green intent, as an old friend of his was the biggest source of green intent chords he had ever seen in his life. However, on the other hand, he wasn't sure if he was allowed to reveal about his friend's true condition to anyone, including Leo. Decisions. Well, I'll make the other ones later. First let me help you perceive black, Charles said, as he took the last drag from his cigarette before stubbing it under his toe. Watch me closely boy, black intent is slightly different in meaning to black aura. As while black aura is confirmation of when one is lying to you, black intent reveals to you someone's intention of lying before they've committed the act. So it's not a confirmed event, but rather a visualization of a probability. Charles explained, as he pointed towards the cigarette butt he just stubbed underneath his toe. Absorb some life essence and ask me whether or not I stubbed that cigarette butt under my feet. He instructed, as Leo followed his guidance and first absorbed a sliver of life essence to the back of his eye, before asking Charles the question. Commander, did you stub that cigarette butt under your feet? He said, and almost immediately saw a black thread snapping into place between the two of them, connecting his own heart to that of Charles's. Do you see it boy? Charles asked happily, as he could see Leo perceiving the cord where it was supposed to be. Now watch this closely, he continued, before saying, No, I did not stub that cigarette. As immediately, the black cord connecting them splintered apart like brittle glass, dissolving into a haze that wrapped around his entire body. Leo's eyes narrowed. The aura that coated Charles's body was the same as what he had been able to perceive before today when someone lied to him, however, the cord was a new addition. Interesting, Leo muttered, his pupils contracting slightly as he traced the residual strands of black surrounding Charles. Charles, however, only chuckled softly and leaned in closer. Good, you saw it. But don't stop there. Ask again. Do not let your focus waver this time. Leo inhaled slowly, centering himself before repeating, Commander, did you stub that cigarette butt under your feet? This time, the black cord snapped into view once again, but instead of quivering violently it seemed more brittle, more fragile, as if something had changed from last time. Yes, Charles replied evenly as the cord shattered once more, yet unlike before, no black aura spread around him. His presence remained still, unchanged, clean of deceit. I see now, Leo mused, as Charles tilted his head, watching his expression closely. You see it now, don't you? Black intent is the thread of choice, the moment where truth and lie diverge. When the intent to deceive exists, the cord forms between us. But only when the lie is carried through does that intent become an aura. He explained, as Leo exhaled sharply. This was yet another color crossed off his list. So if someone talks to me without the intent to deceive me, the cord won't form. But only if they harbor the intent to deceive me will it snap into place, and only if they follow through with it, will it turn into black aura. Leo concluded, as Charles nodded happily. Leo had grasped the concept of black intent in full, yet just to be sure, he opened the codex for confirmation, where just as he had expected, fresh golden ink began bleeding onto the page. Dash 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 dash. Greater than you have grasped the shadow of black. The thread before the lie, the fracture before the fall. Mastering black intent is the ultimate curse. For now you will see the betrayal before it breathes. You will know when even the ones you love harbor deceit. Their words will cut before they are spoken. Their eyes will wound before they betray. And in time, it will drive you mad. For no heart is free of shadow. No bond is free of fracture. Black does not reveal truth. Black reveals the sickness that festers beneath trust. Dash 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 dash. The codex revealed, as though it itself delighted in the torment it promised, causing Leo's left eye to flutter in anger. Someday I'm going to punch the sick creator of this book on his face. Leo mused, as he closed it shut and stored it away. Chapter 598, A Persistent Request. Planet Ixtal, Soren's castle, Charles's POV. Charles and Soren sat across from one another in the dim chamber, the silence stretching between them heavier than words. Gone was the radiant god who dazzled the masses with golden light and unshakable poise, for before Charles now sat the frail truth beneath the illusion. The oversized drape that had once clung to Soren's broad frame now sagged from his shoulders like a funeral cloth, the fabric pooling at his sides as though even it had given up trying to hold him upright. His skin, once bronzed with vitality, carried the chalky pallor of sickness, his features sharper than Charles remembered from his last visit, as if time itself had carved away the flesh to reveal the dying man beneath the mask. Even the faint tremor in his hands as he poured the tea betrayed how far he had fallen, and yet his eyes, though ringed with fatigue, still carried that unbearable patience, as if he were not fazed by his current condition at all. The boy is experiencing existential overload, old man, he needs your help. In the entire universe, I've never seen someone carry as many green intent lines as you do. Please, I'm begging you, let him see at once. Charles pleaded, as Soren gently brought the cup of brewed tea to his lips. He looked into Charles's eyes, as if trying to see the extent of his desperation, before eventually putting the cup down as he smacked his lips. How much do you really know about the boy Charles? I can see that you care about him deeply, but can you vouch for his true nature? Soren asked, as Charles frowned at the question. The way Soren framed the question meant that he clearly knew something that Charles did not, and was hence deliberately setting him up for failure. What did he do? Charles asked, as Soren shrugged in dismissal. So you don't know. Quite the mentor you are then. Your student is making quite big moves without you knowing. Soren teased, as Charles frowned even more. Your boy killed the 12th. The one parading as the 12th elder, or I should say the 7th elder now, is actually a fraud. Did you know about this? Soren asked, as Charles turned ashen pale. Leo killed an elder? He asked, shock evident in his voice as Soren nodded in confirmation. With his own hands at that. Seemed quite angry when he did it too. Soren said, as Charles turned quiet. He had not expected Leo to kill an elder, and had also not expected him to keep something so important from him. Sip, sip. A few minutes passed, until he eventually regained his composure and said. If you knew about it, why didn't you do something? Charles asked, as Soren shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly. To be honest, I don't care. I don't approve of the current Elders' Council, I don't think you do either. What the boy did was wrong, but he was smart enough about it to not let anyone else find out. And hence I've let it slide. As long as the masses don't find out, I see no reason to take action. Soren said, as Charles let out a long sigh of disappointment. On a personal level, he too did not approve of the Elders' Council, however, he also understood that sneakily murdering them could not be the solution. Well, I'm sure the 12th elder must have done something to deserve that death, but I'll need to have a talk with the boy about his behavior. If he wants to uproot the council, he should have the balls to start a revolution to do it. And I'll support him wholeheartedly along the way, Charles said as he pinched the top of his nose. I don't know what to say here, I still want you to help the boy. But if you think he can't be trusted, then I'll have to think of something else. But I'm running really low on time, Charles requested, as Soren gazed deeply into his eyes once more. To be fair, he did not wish to show his weak side to anyone but Charles, because once it became public knowledge that Lord Soren, the protector of the evil cult, was now a husk of a warrior he once was, the cult would no longer be safe. However, looking at the desperation in Charles's eyes, he couldn't refuse his request either. Why him? What's so special about this boy that you of all people are begging me to help him? Because last time we met, you wanted nothing to do with him. I practically had to force you to train him. So what's changed between then and now for you to behave this way? Soren asked, as he saw the conviction in Charles's eyes light up. The boy's special. I don't know how else to say it, but he's truly special. He's got a stable mind over his shoulders. He doesn't get carried away by praise or fame. He doesn't care about petty things like how others perceive him, or whether something is beneath him or not. And he has this unshakable drive to become better that's almost fascinating to watch. Charles began, as his voice lit up as he described Leo. He has the most insane natural-born talent I've seen, but also the work ethic necessary to make it count. And I've never seen a kid have them both. You've seen it with your own eyes. Him defeating a warrior a full tier above him, and he's gotten at least twice as strong since. It's unbelievable, almost frightening even. But he makes me believe that the ancient prophecy might really be true. If there was ever a kid who could become the next timeless assassin, it's got to be him. But he won't get there if I don't help him overcome this existential overload. You ask why I'm behaving this way. My answer is, I'm behaving this way because I need to do my part in helping him become this ultimate version of himself that I know he can be. You're dying old man, and I'm never going to become a god. I know you're not one to pin your hopes on a single kid. And I know you believe in the prophecy like it's an inevitable truth. But for me, he's your only viable replacement. If you can hang on for 200 more years, I know I can turn him into a god in that same time frame. Charles answered, as Soren chuckled at his response. You've grown soft, you fool. Never thought I'd see the day when you care about someone apart from yourself to this degree. Soren observed, as Charles blushed slightly at the remark. He knew he sounded like an obsessed teacher who cared too deeply about his pupil at this moment. However, that was exactly how desperate he felt. He wanted to help Leo at any cost, and he was even ready to beg Soren for it. Very well then, old friend. If you think so highly of him, I won't deny your request. However, I demand that you educate him before you bring him here before me. And also that you confront him for his crimes. I might have let one murder slip, but make sure to tell him that I won't let another one go unnoticed. Soren said, as Charles beamed at his approval. Thank you, old man. I won't let you regret this. Chapter 599, Confrontation. A few hours later, Planet Juxta, Commander Charles's office, Leo's POV. Leo could feel the tension settle thickly between them as he sat across from Charles in the cramped office, the military commander looking far more severe than usual. Charles's gaze cut into him with sharp, unwavering intensity, stripping away every layer of pretense until Leo felt exposed to the marrow of his soul, as though the man's very eyes were declaring, I know what you did, and I know what you're trying to hide. What's wrong, Commander? Why are you looking at me like that? Leo asked at last, his tone calm but guarded. Charles rolled his eyes with deliberate exaggeration, though his voice when he spoke was low and gravelly. Boy. He leaned forward slightly, the weight of his presence filling the room. Why did you kill the 12th elder? Leo's eyes widened, his pulse quickening as disbelief spread across his face. He had no clue how Charles had uncovered the truth, and in that moment he knew he had no cards left to lie. Snap! A black intent cord flared from his body, snaking across the space to tether itself to Charles, the connection heavy and suffocating. Charles squinted harder, the sharpness in his gaze daring him to speak anything but the truth. So you found out, huh? Leo muttered eventually, letting out a slow breath as though releasing a weight. Yes, I killed the 12th elder. I did it because of how he treated my family. He's the one who put my brother in a coma and then shamelessly altered his memories to pin the blame on the Red Army. He's the one responsible for my father going blind in one eye, and my mother suffering from countless nightmares over the last few months. The man brought my family nothing but pain and misery, and he felt no shame for it. He had to die, Commander, after everything he put us through, he just had to die. Charles studied Leo's aura carefully, eyes narrowing as he tested the truth in every flicker of color that rippled from him, then gave a small nod. Soren knows, Charles said finally, his tone edged with gravity. He tracks the lives of the elders and the dragons. If one of them dies, he perceives it immediately. Your little adventure did not go unnoticed. Leo merely shrugged, his eyes blazing with defiance. Oh, I knew he'd find out. The 12th elder himself warned me before he died that if I killed him, Soren would punish me. But you did it anyway. Charles asked, surprise flickering in his expression. Yeah, I did it anyway. I wasn't going to let a bastard who brought so much suffering to my family keep breathing. I knew the risks, but I chose to kill him because it was the right thing to do. I'm not some unhinged lunatic, but what's the point of training this hard, of growing this strong, if I can't even avenge my family? Leo said, his words sharp but steady as Charles's lips curved upward in something between approval and warning. There's a way to solve every problem, boy, and murder is not the solution to all of them. Such actions are unbecoming of a so-called hero. You had evidence, didn't you? Enough to bury him through the courts. The cult of ascension may be rotten, but not even the elders are above the law. The High Court of Vorthas could have stripped him of his title, maybe even cast him in chains. But this path you've chosen is dangerous. If your secret slips, and chaos spirals out of control, there may come a day when I'm forced to arrest you. And believe me, boy, even though I don't want to, if that day comes, I will not hold back. Leo leaned back, his expression unflinching. The courts wouldn't have killed him, Commander. And I wanted him dead. That's my justice. Charles exhaled sharply, pressing his fingers to the bridge of his nose as though warding off a growing headache. What am I to do with you? He muttered. He let the silence hang for a moment, the faint crackle of the lights above echoing through the chamber, before speaking again. Just don't do it again. If you want to replace the council, then start a revolution. Expose their crimes to the public, burn their reputations to ash, and destroy them properly. Underhanded methods like murder do not suit the image of a dragon. Leo shook his head slowly. I don't plan to kill any others yet, but I won't promise that I never will if one of them comes for me. I'm not the dragon, Commander. I'm the shadow dragon. And before he died, the 12th elder admitted something: the council is plotting against me. They want to cull my influence. With 2 monarch tier slaves at my command, I stand equal to an army, and they hate that. Logic tells me to strike first, but I won't. Not yet. Because I already have a spy in their ranks. But hear me now, Commander, if I catch even a whiff of danger directed towards me or my family, I will send Viper to pay them a visit before dawn. Charles clenched his fists under the table, fighting the storm in his chest. On one hand, the boy's ruthlessness mirrored his own instincts so closely it was hard to rebuke him. But on the other hand, he knew the image of a shadow dragon hunting elders in the dark could shatter the cult's fragile unity. So finally, with another long exhale, he decided to give in. Fine, but be smart about it. Inform me before you make your move, and always prepare a public contingency. If things spiral out of control, you'll need the people's opinion on your side. In the end, I only march on Soren's orders, and as long as he doesn't command me to arrest you, I won't. Leo brightened, flashing him a cheerful smile and a casual thumbs up. Thanks for understanding, Commander, he said, as Charles pinched his nose once more. Don't thank me, you little rascal. I was supposed to scold you today, not agree with you. He muttered, looking more disappointed in himself than Leo. However, he couldn't help but agree with the boy's logic of justice, since he himself wasn't too different. We are going to pay Soren a visit later today, so dress in your formal best and inform your bodyguards that you won't be taking them with you to Ixtal. We leave in 2 hours, he said, as he kicked Leo out of his office in dismay. I appreciate everything you do for me, Commander. I know I can be a handful. But trust me when I say this, it's only because of you, and people like you, that I have even a tether of loyalty for the cult. Without you here, I really wouldn't give a damn about this organization. Leo said, as Charles froze at the words, his expression caught between pride and dread, as though uncertain whether to take them as a compliment or a warning, before waving him out in silence. Chapter 600, Meeting Soren. Planet Ixtal, outside Soren's castle, Leo's POV. The trek through the lost forest toward Soren's castle weighed heavier on Leo's body than any battlefield march he had ever endured, for this was no warfront or arena, but the threshold of the god who reigned above mortals and monarchs alike. Do not speak of what you see inside. I mean it, boy. Don't talk about it to another soul, not even your mother. Charles warned, as Leo nodded slowly, the seriousness in the commander's tone sinking deep into his chest. He understood what Charles wanted to convey. Secrets of the divine were never meant for careless tongues. Shift. For all his bravado in the face of council elders and monarchs, Leo found himself feeling unusually restless at the prospect of meeting Soren, as he could hardly stand still. Shifting from foot to foot, he seemed more like a restless toddler than a calm warrior, yet Charles said nothing about his impatience. Charles understood that the prospect of meeting a god at his private residence was bound to make even the most patient warriors feel anxious, and hence, he did not think any less of Leo because of it. Creak. The gates stirred and opened slowly, the sound of their grinding echoing across the courtyard until a narrow gap revealed a figure within. Leo straightened instinctively, his body ready to bow or salute, yet the sight before him brought only confusion. A frail man appeared in the doorway, his robes hanging loose across his thin frame, shoulders hunched as though carrying invisible weights, his skin pale and almost translucent in the dim light. His hands trembled faintly as he leaned against the door, and his breathing came shallow, each rise and fall of his chest looking as though it might be his last. Leo blinked, the image clashing violently against the memory carved in his mind. The Soren he remembered was no withered shell, but the most majestic warrior he had ever seen, broad-shouldered and commanding, eyes bright with a power that seemed to bend the air around him. This man, by contrast, looked more like a servant, the kind of nameless attendant one would expect to sweep floors and prepare tea. Yet before Leo could open his mouth to ask, Charles lowered his head and bowed deeply, his back bent in genuine reverence. The air caught in Leo's throat as realization struck. Charles would never bow to a servant. This frail, fragile figure standing in the doorway was none other than Soren himself, the protector of the cult of Ascension, the god who had stood at the pinnacle of cult power for 2 millennia now. Leo's eyes widened as he tried to reconcile the image before him with the legend in his memory, his pulse hammering as one truth became clear. Soren was sick, and no one else in the cult possibly knew. His first instinct was disbelief, yet when Charles continued to bow, Leo followed suit without hesitation, lowering his head deeply in respect. Soren's pale lips curved into the faintest of nods, his voice soft but steady. "Come in, please." The doors parted wider, and the two followed him into the castle. A thick scent of alchemical herbs and copper clung to the air, heavy and strange, as though every wall of the abode had absorbed years of experiments and suffering. Soren's steps were slow, his oversized robes dragging faintly against the stone floor, yet he carried himself with a dignity that not even frailty could strip away. He led them into a modest meeting chamber where a small table had already been set, as with a faint gesture, he invited Leo and Charles to sit. Sit. The two of them sat slowly, and almost as soon as they did, with trembling hands, Soren reached for a steaming kettle and carefully poured tea into 2 porcelain cups, his grip unsteady but precise, as if forcing his body to obey sheer will. Tip. He set the cups gently before them, before then pouring one for himself, as he adjusted the folds of his robe and lowered himself onto the seat across from them. "Ag," he groaned, like an old man sitting down on a bench before showing a genuine smile. One that was warmer than Leo ever expected from a man of his stature, as he alternated his gaze across the 2 guests. "Please, it is a special sweet batch I brewed myself. I hope you like it," he encouraged, as Charles took a sip first, with Leo following suit next. Sip. The tea was unlike anything Leo had ever tasted before, sweet and mellow on the tongue yet carrying a subtle sharpness that spread warmly down his throat, seeping into his chest and outwards through every limb as though life itself had been steeped into the brew. It was delicious, not in the ordinary way of fine leaves or rare spices, but in a manner that felt almost sacred, as if the liquid carried with it some fragment of Soren's own essence. The warmth of it pulsed through Leo's body, clearing the fatigue of the long trek, dissolving the weight of tension from his muscles, and sharpening his senses with a clarity that bordered on unnatural. For the first time since stepping into this castle, he felt his nerves settle, his thoughts aligning like blades sliding into place. Whatever conversation awaited them ahead, he realized he was prepared to meet it with a mind as sharp and steady as if he had been meditating for days. Even his aura flickered faintly in response, threads of color weaving brighter, steadier, more controlled, as he lowered the cup and exhaled a slow, satisfied breath. "It's remarkable," Leo admitted softly, his voice carrying no pretense, only truth, as Soren's smile deepened and his weary eyes glimmered with something between pride and melancholy. "My father discovered the herbs to brew this tea while he was on an expedition to a non-mana planet. My brother and I drank it often while growing up. It's a special tea for me," Soren said, as Leo looked at him, before looking towards Charles who seemed eager to break the ice. "It's good tea," Charles said at last, setting his cup down with care, though his tone shifted, carrying the weight of command. "But that's not what we are here for now, is it?" His gaze locked firmly on Soren, and for the first time since entering the castle, Leo felt the mood shift, the easy warmth thinning into something heavier. "When you're ready, please show it to him, Lord Soren. Your injuries. Show him just how bad they are, so that he understands the willpower it takes you just to stay alive every single day." Leo's brows lifted slightly, surprise flickering across his face as he glanced between them. Soren chuckled softly, the sound dry but not without humor. "Don't worry, boy. I don't look as bad as your brother did in a coma," he said, as he began to loosen the folds of his robe, the heavy fabric slipping down from his shoulders as his frail fingers tugged it open to reveal the truth beneath. Chapter 601, The Sixth Intent. Planet Ixtal, Soren's castle, Leo's POV. The heavy folds of Soren's robe slipped down from his shoulders, and in that moment the breath in Leo's chest caught, his world narrowing to the frail body revealed before him. Across Soren's chest and abdomen stretched scars that did not look like scars at all, but open wounds frozen in time, glistening with a slick black fluid that oozed sluggishly yet never fell, as though his flesh itself had been cursed to bleed without end. Dark veins pulsed faintly around the injuries, throbbing and writhing, fighting desperately to stitch shut what simply refused to heal, as the sight alone felt like a contradiction to every law of life Leo had ever known. And then he saw the green. Without warning, a vibrant green aura blazed around Soren's figure, so bright and thick that Leo's vision nearly blurred trying to contain it, yet laced throughout that brilliance were countless fractures where the blackness seeped out like poison, dripping across the light but never extinguishing it. "Do you see it now, boy? Do you see his will to survive?" Charles asked, as at that moment, from within that bright green aura sprouted thin lines of intent, luminous threads that bound Soren to Charles and then to Leo, the connections subtle yet undeniable, as if the gods' very existence was tethered to theirs in ways neither of them could yet comprehend. Leo's stomach turned, his pulse racing as he touched one of the green intent lines, and as soon as he did, he felt the reason behind Soren still hanging on. Gasp! Leo gasped for air, as he realized that Soren was still holding on because he had no successor to pass on the throne. He was holding on, because neither Charles, nor him, were ready to replace him yet. And hence, he suffered. Not because he was afraid to die, but because he was afraid of dying without an heir. This man should not be alive, Leo realized, as from his perspective every breath that Soren drew seemed to claw its way through lungs that were half-rotted. From his eyes, every faint tremor of Soren's hands carried the weight of flesh refusing to obey. Every flicker of his aura screamed of a battle being waged unceasingly within his body. Yet still, he sat before them, not only alive, but smiling with a quiet, almost paternal calm. The sheer willpower it must have taken to remain seated at this table, to pour tea with shaking hands, to wear the mask of dignity when his very body sought to betray him. Leo could not fathom it. What kind of man could endure this? What kind of a god is he to still remain unbroken beneath this suffering that should have killed him centuries ago? Leo wondered, as he bowed his head reverently before Soren. These are origin blade scars. The only metal that can hurt gods. But you may call it nature's way of cursing divinity. Soren said, as Leo listened with a sharp mind. I received these injuries 2200 years ago, during the Great Betrayal. At first I remained alive because I wanted to avenge my father's death. And hence, despite these injuries, I clung onto life with a passion. However, now, I'm only holding on because my death would spell the end of the cult. And so, I save what remains of my strength for the days when the cult's survival demands it most. He confessed, as Leo finally understood why Soren was never around to look after the cult's day-to-day operations. It wasn't that he did not care. It was just that he did not have the strength left in him to fight every battle. Cough, cough. He coughed gently, before covering his body up again, as he sat back down and sipped on some hot tea to soothe his throat. The will to survive. I hope I showed you what you came for. Soren said, as Leo bowed deeply, his heart genuinely feeling moved by Soren's magnanimity today. It surely must not have been easy for the great god to reveal his weak side to someone. Especially to a notorious kid like Leo. However, he did so anyway, and Leo was thankful for it. Lord Soren, if you don't mind, may I ask you something? Leo asked, as Soren smiled gently once more, and gestured for him to go on. This origin metal blade that cut you, is it something super rare? Leo questioned, as Soren chuckled at his words. Origin metal is the rarest element in the universe. It was created in trace amounts during the birth of the universe, and has never been reproduced since. It's a metal that was created at the birth of time, and hence, it's the only metal that can hurt beings who are beyond time. Soren answered, as Leo's eyes widened in disbelief. So of all the gods, who all possess this rare metal? He continued, as Soren now felt his interest piqued at Leo's line of questioning. Of all the gods I know, the only ones who are in possession of significant quantities of origin metal would be my brother, Caliph, who stole my father's origin blades. Multheric, the ancient dragon, who possessed teeth coated with origin metal. And Zonrock, who died protecting his 2 origin metal ingots. Soren said, as Leo felt his heart skip a couple beats. Up till now, he had absolutely no clue that origin metal was so rare, or that its real use was to kill gods, as if he did, he would have never given up one of the 2 ingots he stole to Dupravel after stealing them from Zonrock. Shit. Didn't Dupravel say that he gave that ingot to a god named Morris? Leo recalled, as during one of their casual conversations recently, Dupravel had informed him of what he did with that metal once Leo had turned it over. At the time, Leo didn't think much of it. However, only now did he realize the severity of it. What's with you, boy? Why do you suddenly look pale? Charles asked, as Leo let out a dry cough. So, I have some good news, and some bad news. Which do you wish to hear first? He asked, as he alternated a nervous gaze between Charles and Soren. Chapter 602, Revelation. So, I have some good news, and some bad news, which do you want first? Leo asked cautiously, as Soren and Charles simultaneously raised an eyebrow in expectation. I suppose it's better to start with the good news, Leo continued after swallowing hard, as he forced the words out with an uneasy gulp, because maybe that will make the bad news a little easier to digest. He inhaled slowly before dropping the revelation. I have in my possession a slab of origin metal stolen from Zonrock. The words landed like a thunderclap, as both Soren and Charles shot upright in their seats, the wood scraping violently against the stone floor while their eyes widened in disbelief. You have what? Charles roared, as his hand shot out and clutched Leo by the collar, lifting him halfway out of his chair while his voice cracked with shock. Leo looked aside, refusing to meet his eyes, as he repeated with a strained tone, I have a slab of origin metal, not literally on me, but here in the cult, and I can retrieve it anytime you want. I mean, in case you want it, Lord Soren. Charles released him with a shove, his breath ragged with disbelief, while Soren dragged a trembling hand through his thinning hair, his lips curling into a frail yet grateful smile, as though silently thanking the heavens for granting him this moment. Burst. In Soren's eyes, Leo became wreathed in a sudden bloom of golden aura, the brilliance flaring so sharply it felt almost divine. And in that instant Soren understood with absolute clarity, that whether he chose to accept the slab of origin metal and endure the agony of trying to forge it, or whether he decided that his old body was not strong enough for such an adventure, and hence chose to pass on this opportunity, would determine how he spent the last few years of his life. I took the metal from Zonrock's grave back when I was inside the time-stilled world, Leo admitted quickly, as if afraid Charles might throttle him again. It was probably the most thrilling mission of my life, and the good news is, there were 2 slabs, one of which I still have. His words faltered as his eyes flickered nervously between them. But the bad news is, I gave the other to Dupravel, who in turn passed it on to the god Morris as part of some elaborate deal. The admission struck heavier than the good news, as silence filled the room like smoke choking the air, until Charles's patience snapped once more. You gave a slab of origin metal to Morris. He shouted, his voice rough with fury, as he seized Leo by the collar again, dragging him forward until the table rattled beneath their weight. Like I said, it wasn't me directly, Leo protested quickly, raising his hands in surrender. I gave it to someone, who gave it to someone else, and I didn't know any better at the time. Soren lifted a frail hand and placed it gently on Charles's shoulder, as his calm voice broke through the tension. It's fine, Charles. The boy clearly didn't understand the weight of what he carried. Charles huffed angrily as he released Leo again, his fists curling tight while he sank back into his seat, his chest rising and falling heavily with frustration. You're a well of secrets, boy, Charles muttered with bitter sarcasm, as his sharp gaze refused to leave Leo's face, and every single day I learned something new about you. Leo gave his most innocent smile in return, while the threads of golden intent still flickered faintly in the air, and yet the innocent expression on his lips fooled neither of them. Well, regardless, I suppose this is a cause for celebration. It does not matter if the enemy holds the same capability as us, so long as we too possess one half of the metal. So from that perspective, you have done well. Charles remarked, his words carrying a rare note of approval, as Leo let out a sigh of relief. I have dreamed of the day I would lay my hands on my father's origin blades, for with them in my grasp I could finally exact the revenge that has eluded me for 2 millennia, Soren began, his tone soft yet steeped in melancholy. You have no idea how long and hard I searched for even the faintest trace of origin metal. 2,000 years of endless effort, and all I was ever able to gather was a mere 20 grams, an amount so pitiful it could never hope to forge even the smallest of blades. And yet you, a mortal still climbing the rungs of power, managed to retrieve a full slab. He gave a hollow chuckle, shaking his head slowly. It is almost laughable how fate moves its pieces, though I suppose one might call it competence instead. To rob Zonrock's grave and to walk away with his most prized treasure, that surely would not have been an easy feat. But if you could achieve that while still being mortal, then perhaps Charles is not wrong in his assessment of you. If nurtured carefully enough, you may truly go far, farther than most can imagine. With that, Soren lifted his cup and drained what remained of the tea, as for a brief moment his frail body seemed stirred by fresh vitality, his eyes sharpening as they locked onto Leo. You are suffering from existential overload, aren't you? And the only intent color beyond your reach is golden. Before Leo could respond, Soren's body flared in Leo's vision, enveloped by a thick golden aura that shimmered with the weight of fate itself. Well then, son, since you have rendered me such a great service, I shall grant you the chance to claim a reward unlike any other. My only question is, do you dare accept it? Soren asked, as a golden thread of intent shot outward, bridging his chest to Leo's, as Leo's eyes widened in awe. This was it, the final color he needed to perceive before completing his mastery over the sevenfold revelation codex. And now it lay right before him, within his grasp. Yes, I dare, he replied, too swept away in the moment to even ask what the opportunity entailed, as Soren let out a slow, heavy exhale. I only hope he grants you a chance, Soren murmured, his voice low with something almost like prayer, before rising to his feet and guiding Leo deeper into the castle. As he opened doors inside his home, that hadn't been opened in dozens of centuries. Chapter 603, Soren's Most Precious Treasure. Planet Ixtal, Soren's Castle, Leo's POV. Soren led Leo and Charles down the winding castle stairs to his personal treasure vault, a chamber he had likely not opened for over a millennium. Creak. When the heavy doors creaked open, Leo's eyes widened at the sight within, for this was no ordinary armory or storage, but a hall of wonders. Gleaming divine dagger sets rested upon polished stands, unique blades forged from long-lost metals glittered faintly in the dim light, enchanted boots lay in rows beside rolled skill scrolls that pulsed with dormant power, while countless other relics were arranged meticulously across the shelves, each of them radiating a presence that marked them as treasures impossible to find anywhere else in the universe. Yet among these artifacts of unimaginable value were items of a different nature, objects that carried no visible aura, but were personal items that Soren treasured the most. On a shelf beside a few skill scrolls, was a small picture preserved in crystal of Soren with his father and Caliph, while just beside it was a training dummy cut in half, that had rotted from the wood deteriorating over the centuries, but was still kept in this treasure chamber as if it were as valuable as the other objects in this room. However, even with such abundance, Leo's gaze was drawn to the farthest corner of the room, where a single casket sat apart from the glittering relics, small enough to be overlooked if not for the reverence with which Soren approached it. The great god's frail hands trembled as he reached down, opening the lid with deliberate care, as from within he retrieved a tiny case that held 2 glass vials, each no larger than a finger and each containing a single drop of transparent liquid that shimmered faintly like captured starlight. Soren cradled the vials in his palms as though they were the most precious objects in existence, his voice breaking as he began to speak. "My father made this treasure for me and my brother, in case he ever met an unexpected demise," he whispered, and even that simple sentence carried a weight that made Leo's chest tighten. "I found it after he passed away. He left us a will. In the letter he wrote that inside these vials lies a chance to see him one last time, to speak with him in a dream world if either me or Caliph ever needed closure. He said that if we were truly his sons, we would never take it, and we would find our own way through life. But in case one of us ever felt too lonely, or too lost, or too consumed by despair, we could drink from this vial and he would grant us 20 minutes of his presence." Soren's grip on the vials tightened as his throat caught with unspoken longing. "I have saved mine for the day I take my last breath, as proof that I endured as he wished me to, and that I walked my own path without calling upon him. As even though for the past 2,000 years I have wanted to drink it every day, I have still endured, like I'm sure he'd want me to. But I reckon that Caliph is no longer worthy of his gift after his betrayal, so I place it in your hands. You may drink his share and meet my father, the peerless warrior they called the timeless assassin." Leo and Charles both leaned forward, their eyes wide, the weight of what had just been offered pressing down on them like the gravity of another world. "I do not know if he will accept you," Soren admitted, his voice fragile yet unwavering. "This treasure was never intended for you, so perhaps nothing will happen. But if he does choose to acknowledge you, if he decides to speak with you, then I promise you that those 20 minutes will change your life forever." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the faint clink of the glass vials as Soren set one of them back inside the casket, and opened another, which he offered to Leo to drink. "All the best, son, and in case he asks about me, just tell him that no, don't tell him anything about me, just say, I'll tell him the story of my life myself someday," Soren said, as he seemed to catch himself right before giving in to his temptations. "Tremble." With trembling hands, Leo grabbed the open vial, before drinking the liquid in one smooth gulp. Gulp. The liquid felt like swallowing a fragment of starlight, cool and weightless as it slid down his throat, yet the moment it touched his stomach it spread like fire through his veins, searing without burning, filling every nerve with a strange clarity that was both exhilarating and terrifying. His chest tightened as though his heart had been shackled by invisible chains, while his vision began to blur at the edges, dark stains creeping inward as if night itself were spilling across his eyes. The chamber around him dissolved slowly, the walls of stone stretching like melted wax before collapsing into nothingness, as the weight of his body fell away and he was carried into a darkness that was neither suffocating nor empty, but something in between, a space that seemed to breathe faintly with life unseen. Thump, asterisk thump. His pulse became the only sound he could hear, steady and loud, until even that too faded into silence, and in its place came the faint ripple of a world forming around him. Colors bled into shape, muted at first before sharpening, as the dark gave way to the outline of soil beneath his feet, to the quiet shimmer of a sky that did not belong to any planet he knew, as if he had stepped into a dream that was never meant to be touched by mortals. Rustle. A figure appeared before him, squatting low, elbows resting on his knees as sharp eyes studied him with suspicion, the man tilting his head slightly as if asking without words, "Who the hell is this boy?" Leo's breath caught in his throat, because even without introduction he knew. The face was younger than the frail crystal image, the posture alive with untamed sharpness, yet the resemblance was unmistakable. It was the man from the picture he saw just moments ago. Soren's father. The Timeless Assassin. Chapter 604, An Interesting Conversation. Dream World, Leo's POV. The Timeless Assassin studied Leo intently, his gray eyes calm yet piercing, as though sifting through long-buried memories while searching for a trace of familiarity in the boy's face that refused to surface. His black hair fell neatly to his shoulders, streaked faintly with silver at the temples, indicating that he was a middle-aged man who, although within his prime, still had a few gray hairs of wisdom. Overall, there was a gentleness to his features that made him seem more like a kind father than the universe-feared killer his legend proclaimed him to be, and instead of the instinctive fear Leo expected to feel upon meeting him, what stirred within him was a quiet, almost unsettling calm. "Your eyes and ears, they carry my father's shape, and I can feel my blood flowing in your veins. Who are you, child? Are you one of my own?" The voice struck Leo harder than the words, for its depth and tone reminded him of Jacob. Not in accent, but in pitch, in timbre, in the way every syllable carried weight, sounding steady and mature. It was like listening to a ghost of home, and the familiarity made Leo's chest tighten. Push. Leo rose to his feet, brushing the dust from his clothes, before extending his hand forward, in a steady and respectful manner. "I'm Leo Skyshard, sir. A descendant of yours," he introduced, as the Timeless Assassin's expression broke into a smile that warmed his whole face, softening the sharpness of his gaze. He clasped Leo's hand firmly, shaking it with surprising warmth. "Oh, a descendant. That explains why you look like my father. Ha ha ha." His booming laughter filled the dreamscape as he placed his hands on his hips with exaggerated cheer, a gesture so carefree it made Leo's left eye twitch in disbelief. This man before him looked more like a doting uncle than the peerless assassin whose name had once shaken empires. "But tell me, son, how did you come across this vial?" "I left them only for Caliph and Soren. I trust my children are faring well," he asked, as Leo scratched awkwardly at the back of his neck, his voice lower than usual. "Well, sir, it was your son Soren who gave me the vial. He told me that if you asked about him, I should not say much, because he wants to tell you the story of his life himself. Preferably on the last day of it." The Timeless Assassin's smile softened further, pride glimmering in his gray eyes as he chuckled deeply. "That sounds exactly like Soren, ha 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 ha. I am proud of that boy." But then his expression grew curious, his voice thoughtful. "I created these vials a few days after I attained godhood, so I don't know what happens in the future or how my life ends. But I left a will entrusting these vials to a confidant, who is supposed to give them to my children after my death. Assuming Soren already has his vial, and is saving it for the last day of his life. May I ask why he gave Caliph's vial to you?" The Timeless Assassin asked, as Leo's gaze dropped, pity shading his features. "Well, I was not there that day, so I do not know every detail. But around 2200 years ago, the records say you were betrayed by Caliph, and that was how you died. So, Soren felt Caliph no longer deserved his vial, and he entrusted it to me." The words left Leo hesitant, as though he had ripped open an old wound. Yet the timeless assassin's face showed no shock, no anger, only a steady acceptance. As instead of outrage, a faint smile curved on his lips. "So that is the thread of fate that finally unraveled, If Calith's hand ended my life, then it was always meant to be. I saw the possibility of it when he was still just a boy. And if I could not stop it even with all my foresight, then perhaps I was never the father I thought myself to be," he said without any bitterness or resentment, as he only expressed a quiet melancholy that made Leo's heart ache. Here was a man speaking of betrayal by his own blood, yet instead of fury, there was only a weary acceptance of what was written in destiny. "I am sorry for your loss, sir," Leo said softly as the timeless assassin waved him off with a small gesture, his steps unhurried as he began walking through the shifting dreamscape, while gesturing for Leo to follow. "What is lost, child. I am already dead, and grief holds no power here. Come, walk with me. Tell me how the cult fares, how the other gods behave, and whether mortals live in peace or continue in suffering. I know Soren must have sent you here for a reason. And I'm sure that he wants me to give you something before our time here ends. Which I will. But indulge me for 8 minutes first, tell me what has become of the universe I left behind, and then I will spend the last 10 minutes of our conversation teaching you something that you truly need." The timeless assassin offered, as Leo nodded readily, falling into step beside him, as he told him about the current state of the cult's affairs. "Well, sir, the cult of ascension is still a force in the universe. So at least it exists, and that's good. Your son, Soren, he's a powerful god now and he leads it. But apart from that there's nothing good to say. The people are happy, but their pride is wounded, for the cult is no longer what it used to be. Legends say that at the end of your life, you controlled close to 85% of the rainbow stream, while the current cult only holds 5% of that land, which comes out to be a handful of planets. The remaining cult members are fiercely loyal, but they yearn to regain the lost pride and territory, which is what they're obsessed with. But progress is slow and the ones who betrayed you are too powerful to push back. It's a mess, sir, but Soren is trying his best, and although the progress of regaining lost pride is slow, I think the worst is behind us and that the cult is on the rise once more." Leo shared, as the timeless assassin winced slightly at that piece of news. "That's not exactly how I envisioned the cult to be 2,200 years after my passing. I thought, by that time it would become a paradise for its people, but I guess I was wrong. If I could go back in time, perhaps I'd focus more on making the cult more self-reliant instead of me micromanaging everything, but I can't change what happened. So I'll try to advise you instead, son, hoping that you fulfill the dream that I could not," the timeless assassin said, as he took in a deep breath and looked towards the sky with a soft, regretful smile on his face. "Let me tell you a small story, son. This was a lesson I intended to pass on to Soren or Calith. But back then I was too stubborn about how I wanted to be as a father, so I never shared my weaknesses with them. In hindsight, maybe I should have. Maybe I need not be so hard on them all the time. But hey, I guess I got the karma for my bad parenting. So I'll try make up for it now," he said, as he placed a gentle hand on Leo's shoulder and let out a deep sigh. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.